IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. Brian is taking a break. He's giving his voice a little bit of a rest because we're going to have a lot of content coming your way over the next couple weeks and throughout the offseason. And he wants to make sure that he gets that voice right before we get there. So we got the first Trev and Shaun Davis show coming at you today. And there's going to be a handful of things that we're going to cover. We're going to start out today talking through, there's been some breaking news in the transfer portal. Right. And there's been 3 young men that have entered their name into the portal. We're going to go over that. We're going to talk through some of their options and what that's going to look like for them, what they did for Notre Dame. And then obviously we got a midweek mailbag today, Shaun, and we're going to dive through some of the questions that you all have. And it's going to be a fun one. I've been seeing some of these questions in here. There's a lot about college football in general, the playoffs, the outlook of this team in 2025. So I'm excited to jump into it today, man. But before we do, how you doing today, Shaun?
I'm wonderful. How you doing, T-Squared?
Hey, man, we're good.
Excited. It's my first mailbag in a long time, so I'm excited to get to these questions and chop it up with IB Nation.
Yeah. Oh, it's going to be fun one, man. It's definitely going to be fun. But look, before we hop into the mailbag, Shaun, like we had talked about, 3 Notre Dame players so far have entered the transfer portal. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, yes, the transfer portal is closed, but for the playoff teams, they get 5 days after their games to submit names into the portal. Players have the option to put their name into the portal. And there's been a lot of questions that have been swirling around about what that's going to look like for Notre Dame right after their loss to Ohio State on Monday night. But the first couple, all right, we'll start off with this one. He was the first one to enter his name in, is Sam Pendleton. And for those who don't remember, Sam Pendleton started the year at Texas A&M at left guard for Notre Dame. They started him next to true freshman Anthony Knapp, and he was their starter at left guard all the way up until Navy week when Billy Schrauth made his return, and they bumped him into the starting lineup at left guard to keep Rocco at right guard. And so Sam Pendleton enters the transfer portal, and it's one of those where, you would have loved to see the kid back because the good that you saw from Sam Pendleton was really, really good. You know what I mean? But again, there is a little bit of understanding from his mindset, right? Because he was the only offensive lineman this year that he was removed from the lineup not due to injury, right? Anthony Knapp left because he hurt his ankle. Rocco Spindler had to leave games because of his ankle. Ashton Craig hurt his knee. Charles Jagusah tore his pec to start the year, so he was out at left tackle. They made the decision to move on from Sam Pendleton. So, Shaun, initial thoughts on Sam Pendleton putting his name in the transfer portal?
Well, the portal now is really about so much more than it used to be. Before the evolution of the transfer portal, it was really about the kid, right? Wanting to leave, looking for opportunity. And I think that's part of the conversation for the most part with all kids that jump in the transfer portal, not just Notre Dame. But I think also, what kind of elevates Notre Dame is that this is a situation, if you go back to recruiting, and just talking to kids, most kids that come to play for Notre Dame, especially 4 or 5-star kids or kids that are really good, they come to Notre Dame, and one of the main reasons is because they want to be at Notre Dame. It's truly a 4-for-4 lifetime decision. So when you see an underclassman like a Sam Pendleton jump into the portal, it's a bit shocking because kids usually will stick around to make sure that they receive that degree from Notre Dame and finish what they started, at least in the classroom, knowing that they will still have 2 years of eligibility to go out and prove themselves on the football field. But I think in this instance, you pointed out something. The only offensive lineman to be removed from the lineup because of performance. We don't know how that played into it. And then the decision for him and his family to make this move at this time. My assumption would be is that he was very well aware of the battle that he was going to have with the incoming freshman, a guy like Sullivan Absher, probably knowing that maybe Jagusah is now going to be the tackle. So now that puts Anthony Knapp in the conversation for a guard position or center. So all of these things really push him further back on the depth chart. And, that is a tough pill to swallow, but it's an honest pill. And it causes you, I would much rather have the truth so I can make an informed decision. And so this looks to me, it seems to be a very informed decision by Sam Pendleton. No one wants to lose a young man. I think there was a bit of a snafu by the coaching staff that led to some of the poor performance by Sam Pendleton. I think there was a snafu that also impacted Anthony Knapp at left tackle that they solved by injury. Now, this is the other side of it. They didn't come to this conclusion because they realized by watching the tape, it probably would be a good idea to put a veteran next to one of these guys. Maybe we should put Pendleton on the right side next to Emil Wagner and then move our veteran over to the left side to help our freshman at left tackle. That only came out of necessity because of injury. So there is kind of, if you want to say point the finger, there is a point the finger or a little bit of a snafu that should be headed towards the coaching staff to say, you didn't exactly do right by these two youngsters on the left side of the offensive line like you could have. So, it's just sad to see him go. And tough pill, but it's really an honest pill. And I think the young man still has a great deal of talent. And wherever he lands, great family, talked to his mother, actually interviewed his mother, while he's being recruited and after he committed to Notre Dame, comes from a great family. And more than likely, because he loves his home, he loves being home. So more than likely, he probably ends up, if I would bet, he ends up at an ACC school. If I would have to bet, he probably ends up at an ACC school. But I think he has a bright future. I really do. I think he has a bright future.
You go through and you look at, I think you brought up a really good point, Shaun, is you kind of look at what his career was at Notre Dame. And in the short moments that you see it, right, you go through and, he starts out at center and it was a position that he clearly was not comfortable playing. They kick him out to guard. And there's two trains of thought, right? Regardless of where he was going to be at, if you want Sam Pendleton to start a guard for you, he's going to be next to a first-time starter, whether that's Emil Wagner or whether that's Anthony Knapp. Now, here's the difference. Anthony Knapp was a true freshman. Emil Wagner is a redshirt sophomore who has gone through reps and gone through off seasons in a college program, right?
Right.
And so I think there was a little bit left to be desired with Sam Pendleton and what he has done this year at Notre Dame, not from something from him specifically, but I do think that there is a little bit of truth of the coaching staff. I don't want to say set him up for failure because they believe that him and Anthony Knapp could perform on the left side of the offensive line. And there were moments where we saw it, mostly in the run game, right? But early on in the season, for the first part of the season, Notre Dame's offensive line, especially on the left-hand side, had a lot of trouble picking up stunts, had a lot of trouble picking up different blitz packages. And I think that comes from having a true freshman and a redshirt freshman start side by side, right? The toughest part about the transfer portal is, especially when you have a coach like Marcus Freeman and a staff that cares this much about every young man that's in each of these position rooms. But at the end of the day, you have to have honest conversations with every player that's a part of your program. And I think honest conversations were had on both sides, right? Like, I don't know what those were. I wasn't in the rooms. I have, you know what I mean? But, with a kid like Sam Pendleton, you kind of look at it and say, hey, when you have guys like Shrouth has 2 years left, Sullivan Absher is let me see here. Sullivan Absher is a redshirt sophomore going into this upcoming season, right? You have guys like Will Black and Matty Augustine and guys like that coming in. And so you kind of have to sit down and talk about how really, like what we've talked about all season long, there's no excuse for Notre Dame's offensive line in 2025 to not be a preseason Joe Moore Award watch list group, right? But with that, having a spoiler riches at the offensive line, you can only start 5 of them.
Right.
You know what I mean? And there's a lot of guys on this roster that have the eligibility to come back that have played significant minutes. Right? I mean, it's weird. You sit down and think about the games that Charles Jagusah has played in. He's played in the Sun Bowl, the Orange Bowl, and the National Championship. And those are the 3 games that he has had meaningful minutes in. Yeah. He's somebody that you don't know where it's going to be. 56 is going to be starting for you somewhere along the offensive line. Right? 74, Billy Shrouth. He's going to be somebody that's going to be starting for you somewhere along the offensive line. And so really you whittle it down to 3 positions that it's you're competing against like 5 or 6, 7 guys, right, to fill those next 3. And Sam Pendleton's a good kid, man. I mean, like we said, the good was very, very good. You know, I mean, he was at one point in time their most tenacious run blocker.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he was the most aggressive. He was finishing blocks. He was driving people off the line of scrimmage. But you kind of saw what that looked like against Indiana when he had to step in at right guard for Rocco, right? And then after that, on the 2 deep, it switched up to Charles Jagusah inserted himself to the 2 deep at right guard. And then we got to see how that unfolded against Penn State. So, again, the way that I look at transfers, it's interesting. It is always odd seeing underclassmen transfer out from Notre Dame because of what the school offers you academically. But wherever Sam goes, I know it's going to be an informed decision. It's going to be something that will take care of him and his future. And you know, you want the kid to have success no matter where he goes. I have that opinion on everybody that transfers from Notre Dame. It's you want to see somebody go and better their career, you know, and I think that it's a good segue into the 2 others and into the 2 other players who decided to enter the transfer portal, both coming out of the wide receiver room. But Deion Colzie and Jaden Thomas both elected to enter their names into the transfer portal as well. And these 2, you could kind of see the writing on the wall a little bit with them. But Shaun, I mean, walk us through your initial reactions to when you saw that news break and your thoughts on it.
Well, I love both of these young men for the same reason, and their journey and their path probably didn't peak or reach the expectation when they were recruited here for different reasons. Deion Colzie, 6'4", 6'5", long, lanky, great ball skills coming out of high school. And so you thought that possibly he could be that guy, that kid that we've been looking for. Maybe not like a Jeremiah Smith, but he could definitely be a difference maker at his size at the wide receiver position. And he just never maximized or reached that potential. And the majority of the time, it was because of injury. And that was the frustrating part about his time at Notre Dame. But Jaden Thomas didn't have that path. Jaden Thomas was more of the overachiever, the kid that you didn't expect to come in and make an instant impact. And somehow he finds his way on the field as a freshman. And he finds his way on the field as a tremendous blocker. And then this year as a leader, still the leader. And both of these young men had opportunities to leave Notre Dame last year, very real opportunities to hop into the transfer portal last year. They chose team goals and team over individuality. Both of them had very great opportunities to jump in the portal and good reason to do it. And so when you go from that and you see how their paths are very different, but they end up in the same place with being 2 great representatives of the totality of Notre Dame student athlete. You look in the dictionary and you'll have pictures of Deion Colzie and Jaden Thomas because they embody what it is to be part of the brotherhood, what it embodies to be everything in the classroom, everything in that locker room, great teammates, and to go out there and do everything you can and what's ever asked of you for team glory and to win football games. So I want to salute both of these young men. And I hope that they experience, wherever they land, the most success that they've ever experienced in their individuality as a football player. Because they deserve it. It's their time. They're both going to receive a degree from the University of Notre Dame. And they both should be saluted for everything that they gave to this university that will still give fruit moving forward. The leadership and who they are, being the seniors and the veteran leaders in that wide receiver room, guys like Jaden Greathouse got to pull from them. This is the blessing for having guys like that in your program. The young receivers, Michael Gilbert, Cam Williams, they pull for them. KK Smith are able to pull from them. And so moving forward, guys like that are ready to grab the reins and go ahead and lead the way they led. And if they develop the leaders that they were, the wide receiver room is going to be in good shape moving forward.
Yeah, I think unselfish is just the best term for them. And the first mailbag question that we actually got, we're going to get to more of the mailbag questions here in a little bit, guys, but I wanted to bring this one up because it's so perfect. DMND13 says, how great and unselfish the teammates were Colzie and Thomas, right? And I think there's a lot of validity to that. You go in, and I think amongst all the skilled positions, right, that are on offense and on defense, wide receiver is kind of one that's highlighted that you expect to go in and make an immediate impact quickly. You go through and you look at all the examples in college football. This year alone, you had Ryan Williams, you had Jeremiah Smith. His freshman year, you had Marvin Harrison. You go through and you think of teams of the past. Devontae Smith caught a game-winning touchdown in the national championship as a true freshman, right? Mm-hmm. You had Jamar Chase in his redshirt freshman year won the Belinkikoff Award and had 21 receiving touchdowns in a season. I saw a stat the other day about what Michael Crabtree did back in 2007 in his freshman year, right? And you go through and you think about it's tough when you are in that position, when your position can come in and make an immediate splash, that you have guys like Deion Colzie and Jaden Thomas and Deion Colzie who put the team glory, something that Marcus Freeman talks about, first, right? They made an emphasis to say, hey, look, we know why we came to college. We knew why we wanted to be D1 level recruits, right? And so you go through and you look at what they've done for this team. Anything that they've asked of them, they did. Outside of being on a triple option team, you know how hard it is to ask a wide receiver to go in and be a blocker? You know what I mean? And they all executed that at a high level, no matter what the task was.
Yeah.
83-0 went in and did it without question and did it to a high ability, right? So you tip your cap to those young men. But the other part of this mailbag question that I like are there any places you'd like to see them go just initially off the top of your head, Shaun?
Well, the trend for most transfers is they like to transfer closer to home, especially if they come from Notre Dame. But that's just across the landscape. It's usually the most money, a better opportunity via NIL, or you're playing closer to home. Case in point, Jaden Mickey. Where did he go? He went closer to home, right? So both of these kids are Georgia kids. I don't know if there are SEC opportunities, maybe at a school like a Vanderbilt, to see value in a Jaden Thomas in their offense. Maybe a kid like Deion Colzie. I could definitely see him getting an opportunity in the ACC and certain things, but just what they embody. Coaches are looking for that. What they embody, the connection. I know the staff is going to be very supportive in helping them to find better situations. And I think they probably want to be somewhere in the South. I would look for them to land in that area because it's closer to home. Their parents have sacrificed coming up to South Bend. That during their time in Notre Dame, and now to be closer to home and have an opportunity, I think it would be somewhere in the South or up there on that eastern seaboard.
Yeah, no, I like that. Somewhere where they go down south, somewhere that just gives them an overall opportunity to start, right? Because I completely forgot that they were from the South. Like that's where they were recruited from. Because initially, my first thought was, well, hey, you guys are already in the Midwest. You guys go up to Ann Arbor, Michigan. I'm not rooting for a Notre Dame player to go to Michigan. I'm just saying, you want to know a receiving room where you could walk in and be a starter. I think it's with the Wolverines. You know what I mean? Like just what that offense needs to get them over the top. And like a guy like a Jaden Thomas and a guy like a Deion Colzie could be a good part of that offense, especially with how much they like to run the football. They'd be good blockers downfield. I think they proved that in their time while they were in South Bend. So those are the three transfer portal news breakers so far. If anything else breaks during the show, we're going to cover it, give initial thoughts. But to put a disclaimer out there, Irish Breakdown is going to dive into so many different things throughout this offseason, right? And there's going to be a lot of different shows that's going to be covering the people coming in, the people that are going out, the people that, people and coaches, right? Players and coaches alike. So the last thing I got to do, though, before we move on to the mailbag section, though, I got to give a shout out to my boy Kane because he was the one that told me about the Michael Crabtree stuff. And he just texted me and gave me a hard time for saying I just saw the stat. So that was not myself. He texted me and let me know about that. So you're welcome. But listen, guys, before we get to that mailbag session, you guys know what it is. Be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast with your friends and family, anybody that you know loves Notre Dame and college football as much as you do. The best way to support what we do here is go to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Just talked about how much is going to be in the offseason, how many good conversations we're going to have around that. Brian, right now, I know he's working on doing film breakdowns and different things from the national championship game, things that we saw throughout the season. So there's going to be a lot of good content coming your way. Just because it's Notre Dame's offseason, it's not Irish Breakdown's offseason. So there's going to be a lot of good stuff coming your way at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Shaun. It's mailbag time, man. And I know before the show we were talking, you haven't done one of these in a while.
So I have not. I'm ready to roll.
I'm pumped to jump into these, man. So the first one that we're going to hit up is this one here from ND. It just means more. Do you expect a decent amount of departures on the defensive line via the transfer portal? You know, it's interesting because so I went through.
What's a decent amount? I guess.
Right. Right. I don't know what that number looks like. Right. I mean, look, I'm not going to throw out any names because I don't want to put anything out there and think that I'm making decisions for these kids or what they plan on doing. But I went through and I made a list of the incoming guys that they got, the transfer portal guys, and all the people with returning eligibility. And there's 22 members across the defensive line. Yeah. At the end of the day, you have a certain amount of scholarships that you have to give out, right? That you have allotted to you. And so some kids, maybe, you know, I know that, I mean, it's unrealistic, right, to assume that a team is going to have zero turnover going in. Mm-hmm. You know, you have the guys that have already, like Gabe Rubio already announced that he's coming back. You know, guys like Donovan Heinisch, I'm sure, are going to end up back in a Notre Dame uniform in 2025. But there's some in there that might have just gotten lost in the scuffle. And with some of the incoming guys coming in, you had Jared Dawson from the transfer portal. You had Elijah Hughes from the transfer portal from USC. So that I'm not sure. But to Shaun's point, I don't know what a decent amount is. You know, I mean, Notre Dame only lost 2 wide receivers so far to the transfer portal. I feel like that's a decent amount. Like you see 2 kids leave and it's like, whoa, you know, but this is, I will say, full transparency, the part of my job that is now new to me is the off-season operations of a collegiate football team.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that decent amount number is, Shaun. I don't know about you, man.
It goes back to the honest conversations that we spoke about when we did talk about the 3 guys that were hopping to the portal already. You referenced it, right? You have a richness of talent in the offensive line room. 5 can only start. But the truth of the matter is you need 8 to 9 throughout the season because you anticipate injuries. Like Notre Dame needed 8 to 9 this year. Man. And those 8 to 9 were good enough. They played good. You need them to 8 to 9 that could play at a certain level, right? Even if you have drop-offs from individual positions. And so the defensive line is the same thing. I think Jared Dawson coming into the picture improves the pass rush or replaces the pass rush that you lose with Riley Mills at that position. I think it was evident in the national championship game that with Howard Cross being injured and not being himself, Gabriel Rubio's not really going to give you a lot of pass rush, but he's very solid in the pass game. So you can actually have Dawson and Rubio next to each other on certain plays next year. And that can only make the linebackers that much better. But I just want to talk about, from a number standpoint, let's just anticipate a couple. Not because anything's wrong, just honest conversation. Nothing different than what we talked about with Sam Pendleton in the trenches. Just honest conversation of what's coming in via the portal and via the recruiting class. And then people really looking at what opportunities are really there for them, right? And just being honest about that. Some kids might stay. Don't forget, you lost Tyson Ford out of that room as well via the transfer portal. So, you know, maybe 1 or 2, but that's just an estimate for me. And I don't know if that's a decent amount. Well, 2 was a decent amount for you for the wide receiver room. So maybe 1 or 2 is a decent amount in the defensive line room as well.
This is always a tough time of the season for me, just watching kids leave, because it's players you familiarize yourself with, and you want to see everybody succeed at Notre Dame. But look, man, you want to talk about defensive line depth. I mean, this season alone, they lost 4 guys, and it wasn't like they lost 4 guys that were, you know, maybe they rotate in or maybe they're in like a 3rd down package. I mean, they lost their starting Viper, the guy that replaced him, a starting defensive tackle, and the guy that rotates in with him, and Jason Onye, all in the same season. And then the guy that lines up next to those guys and Howard Cross was playing on a bad wheel all of the postseason. right? You could tell that there was a big difference there, and you tip your cap to Howard Cross for how he was able to finish the season, but you could tell that he wasn't the same pre-injury, right? So, you need that depth there. You do. And I know we're going to have a lot of conversation in the offseason surrounding the defensive line. There's actually a mailbag question that talks about the position groups that kind of need to step up to get Notre Dame over that hump, right? We've talked about it for the last couple of days. They're close and they're getting close, but there are still some positions in some areas that do need to elevate a little bit to get them over that hump. So that'll come. That'll come for sure. DMND13. What would your ideal 2 deep at wide receiver be next year? I think the positions and rotations could be interesting with Greathouse, Faison, and Will Pauling.
Well, Fields is going to be in the first group. That Greathouse is going to be in the first group. And I think Faison will be in the face group. If we're just going three receivers, right? Notre Dame runs a lot of 12 personnel. So I think the top 2 would probably be Fields and Greathouse / Faison. Right? Now, Will Pauling comes in, and I think he'll work really well in that slot area with Greathouse. Not really sure. I'm going to be interested in how they choose to use Will Pauling, right? Because I think Micah Gilbert has a really good chance to back Malachi Fields at boundary, but I think Micah Gilbert can also play field. I think he could be a field receiver as well. And Micah Gilbert, man, I'll be honest. The staff wanted Michael Gilbert to elevate. They gave him chances in games to elevate. There weren't a lot of receivers, backup receivers that came in that got go balls and back shoulder fades. Micah Gilbert got multiple opportunities in those plays, and he dropped a couple. If he catches those, he probably gets more opportunities. So that just goes to show you, man, like coaches want guys that show that they can do it in practice. They give them the opportunity, and when they get the opportunity, it doesn't matter whether it's the fourth quarter, first quarter, or the fourth quarter, you have to take full advantage of those opportunities. Yeah. That's a kid that I'm looking for, that obviously the coaching staff, by giving him those opportunities, they have an eye on him. I have my eye on him in the offseason. I think he could really make a move and probably get into that second group of receivers. That would probably include, just right now, Pauling, Gilbert, and then I can pull for Cam Williams all I want to, but the kid has to go do it. He has to go do it. So I would say Pauling, Micah Gilbert, and then KK Smith. KK Smith was another kid that got opportunities, right? And I hopefully he can just stay healthy. I want the kid to stay healthy. So I'll throw those 6 out there, and maybe somebody else in the freshman group comes in. I think Elijah Burris, just purely as a route runner, has an opportunity. Just purely as a route runner.
You brought up something that was kind of interesting. I'm going to be interested to see what kind of personnel groupings they run out in next year. They ran a lot of 12 personnel this year, but that was with a mobile quarterback. And I'm going to be interested to see when now. And look, CJ Carr, Kenny Minchie, Steve Angeli, they're not stiffs, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's not like they can't be mobile, but none of them are going to be Riley Leonard. Right. And so I'm going to be interested to see what Mike Denbrock does to potentially spread out the offense more this upcoming season to open up different run lanes for Love and Price and Aeneas and Kedron and Nolan James if he gets the opportunity to come in. Right. And so that's going to be interesting. But I mean, for receiver rotations, if Mike Brown is going to stick with that like 6-man rotation that he had, I think that you have too much talent in this upcoming receiver room to just stick with 6, in my opinion. Now, if they're not ready, then they're not ready, right? And we saw that with Cam Williams this year. All the talent in the world, but there's an adjustment period from high school to college that you kind of have to get adjusted with, right? And so for me, I mean, if they run out there in 11 personnel, I mean, I think right now it'll be one of Raridan or Flanagan, depending on health, like coming out at tight end. But I mean, 3 receivers, you got Malachi Fields at your boundary, right? I mean, I think that's a given. That's why you brought in a 6'4", 225 kid to go be your number 1 boundary guy. And then at the X, I think that's what's going to be interesting. Like, I don't know who's going to be opposite of Malachi on the other side, on the outside. I mean, because they do so much rotating around. You saw Faison do it. You saw Greathouse do it. Chris Mitchell was in there. KK Smith would do it from time to time. So if I'm just picking a group of three, I would say the starters next year most likely will be some combination of Malachi Fields, Jordan Faison, and Jaden Greathouse. You know, again, you also have to factor in with Jordan Faison, he's going to be playing lacrosse in the spring. And so it's going to be interesting to see where like the Will Paulings and the KK Smiths of the world kind of fit into that rotation as well. But KK is a kid you could see on the outside. And then in the two deep, I could see Micah Gilbert kind of being the backup to what Malachi Fields is. I think that's some of the conversations that went on with Deion Colsey and Jaden Thomas of most likely if they would have stayed, if one of them would have stayed, they fill in at the two deep behind Malachi Fields in the boundary. Mm-hmm. But when you have guys like a Micah Gilbert in, you know, even potentially a guy like a Cam Williams who could rotate and move people all around, they could be in there too. But I would say Micah Gilbert probably the backup at boundary. And then you kind of have your fill of, you know, who's it going to be rotating in with Faison and Greathouse. You know, you have Will Pauling, you have KK Smith, you have Cam Williams if he steps up. You know, you have guys like, you know, an Elijah Burris to see what that looks like for him as a true freshman. So I think that there's going to be a good amount of options there in the two deep, I think for sure.
Yeah.
Going into next season, ND, it just means more asked, would putting Knapp at center and have him fight it out with Craig or left guard and have an open competition there? So what are we thinking here, Shaun?
Man, he needs to have a lot of leg days this offseason. I don't care where the kid plays. I need him to have some leg days, right? Because if he moves inside and he's playing against bigger players, which means he has to be able to anchor even much more than he does at tackle. And so I'm going to need him to put in some work, get some leg days, get stronger. And then I would much rather see him battle without a guard. Like, if you can put him next to Charles Jagusah on the left side and then have Shrouf on the right side with whomever wins that right tackle position. And I think Ashton Craig didn't do anything to say he doesn't deserve to get his job or at least go into the spring as the starter, depending upon how healthy he is in his return. I know he did talk about it prior to, I believe, after the Penn State game, he talked about his timeline and being ready for the spring, how everything is kind of lined up for him to be able to come back and do light work and probably get into some drills and things for the spring and be ready to go by the fall. But that's how I would see it. I would give the kid, but once again, that's an opportunity that you need to have honest conversation about, right? As a staff, what is going to be more profitable? Does it really profit us, even though that might be a comfortable position? What's going to profit us team glory versus individual glory for him? What's going to make us a better unit? Him at center or him at guard? You know, because I think he's a little bit more versatile than Ashton Craig. Ashton Craig is probably a little more locked into center. And, you know, that versatility for Knapp says, team glory, he can probably do a lot more for us at the guard position than if we allow him to battle at the center position. But you can do it either way.
Yeah, I think for Anthony Knapp, he has a really good foundation to be an inside player. But at some point, I mean, you go through and you look at Notre Dame's first two opponents. You got Miami and Texas A&M in back-to-back weeks right now. And both of those teams are going to have some big dudes on the interior. Now, Anthony Knapp hasn't played great in space this season, which is why he has and he's a strong run blocker. He has a good foundation to be on the interior. I don't think it's going to be at left guard, though. I think that combination of Jagusah and Shrouf is going to be really hard for this offensive coaching staff to walk away from, right? And so then you start having questions around, one, health of Ashton Craig, and two, who comes back at right guard, right? Who comes back along the interior? Because those are still some question marks that we don't know. What does Rocco Spindler decide to do? What does Pat Coogan decide to do? Those are two guys that have eligibility to return. You know, how healthy is Ashton Craig in the spring, and what does that start to look like? Because if there's one thing that I think that this coaching staff is going to try to do is it's going to be, they're going to look for as much continuity as humanly possible. Right? They're going to look to see. Now, obviously, injuries are something that within a realm of possibilities you can control to a certain extent. but you want to try to get as much as possible. Obviously, the ideal for Notre Dame is to not go through 7 different offensive line starting combinations in a season like they did in 2024. And so what does that look like? Left guard, I don't know, because I don't know if you break up that Jagusah Shrouth combination. Like, that's after what they did in the national championship, matched up against guys like JT Tuimoloau and Ty Hamilton and Tyleik Williams. I don't know how you break that up. You know what I mean? But then you start having combinations around what the right side of the offensive line is going to look like as a whole, really from center over, because I think left guard, left tackle is pretty locked in. I don't know that for sure. There's going to be open competition spread out across the offensive line. But looking at what they did, looking at what Jagusah did in his 2 times at left tackle in the Sun Bowl and in the national championship, I don't know how you say 56 is best fit somewhere else. But if you do, he's another person that's going to be talked about at the guard position, probably at right guard, like what he did in the Orange Bowl. So you have guys along the right side. You know, does Emil Wagner, your most consistent lineman from a health standpoint this season, remain at right tackle, who honestly held his own really outside of one play against Jack Sawyer in the national championship? Do you give a guy like Gerby Lambert an opportunity to go and compete for that right tackle position? What do you do at right guard? Does Rocco Spindler come back? Do you kick Pat Coogan back out to right guard, or do you keep him at center and back up Craig if he's good to go? Or if Craig isn't good to go by the time the season starts, do you keep in Coogan because he's had that experience? Who knows? Do you give Knapp the opportunity to compete? It's all going to be stuff that we're going to cover throughout the offseason, and something that we're definitely going to be keeping an eye on. But I think the offensive line competition from center to right tackle is going to be something that's going to be really fun to cover throughout this season.
Yeah, and I think the interesting conversation, I think a lot of fans go back and forth about guard tackle with Charles Jagusah. It really doesn't make a difference, because honestly, everything everyone says is right.
Yeah.
He could be an elite top 15 pick at guard. And that doesn't mean he can't be a first-round pick at tackle. Like, everyone's right. That means he's a very good offensive lineman and can play up and down the offensive line. So just appreciate the talent. It doesn't matter. It's not our job to figure out where he's going to play. Just know that more than likely he's going to play at an elite level wherever he is on the offensive line. And that's all that matters.
And that answer kind of covers this one from DMND13. Where do you think Jagusah starts next year? Where would you start him if you were the coach? Look, you want to know what kind of impact Charles Jagusah had. In his first appearance at right guard in the Orange Bowl, you immediately got an elevation in play. And that's not a shot at Rocco Spindler. Jagusah was just fully healthy. I mean, Rocco Spindler was playing on one leg in the Orange Bowl against Penn State. And up until he had to leave the game due to re-injuring that ankle on the play that Riley Leonard got evaluated for a concussion, he was doing his best to hold his own, gave the program that year everything that he had. But Jagusah steps in, and immediately there's an elevation. And then for the national championship, he starts at left tackle. Immediately, you get an elevation in pass protection on Leonard's blind side, right? So, look, DM, if there's anywhere that I start him, it is really outside of center, one of the 4 other positions on the offensive line. My takeaway as a coach is I think you start big picture and you work your way down. At least that's what I would do if I was a coach. And you have your guys, especially on the offensive line, that you say, hey, wherever it is, this guy's got to be on the field. And I think Charles Jagusah is at the tippy top of that list. And it's crazy to say because we've seen him play meaningful minutes in 3 games. You know what I'm saying? He's played 10 quarters of meaningful football for Notre Dame. All the Sun Bowl, all the national championship, the second half of the Orange Bowl. So you have a kid who is such an elite talent that he has 10 quarters of a sample size, and you already know, assuming he stays healthy throughout the entire offseason and can continue to build off of those performances, dude's got to be on the field. Just
has to be. And I think we're overlooking the fact 10 quarters of football, and it's obvious who he is. It's obvious what his baseline is.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going to continue to get better. Every rep, this kid, he didn't have fall camp. He got hurt early in fall camp. So he didn't have fall camp to improve. He didn't have the regular season to improve. And he just shows up in the playoffs hey, we need you to go in. And that's the level we get. That's the level of play we get. I don't care where you put them. Just find a place. Find a place and run behind them. And that quarterback is going to be very comfortable knowing that guy is blocking for me in pass pro. Riley Leonard looked a whole lot more comfortable with him at left tackle than he's probably looked all season. So
the one play that stood out to me is Jagusah got beat initially. JTT got a good push on him in a pass set early on in the game, or not early on in the I think it was on Greathouse's second touchdown of the game. That beautiful slot fade that they threw to him, made a contested catch.
Yeah.
JTT got a good push on him, but Jagusah was big enough and had enough strength where he anchored on the right leg and just stoned him. Didn't move after that. That's a kid that has to be on the field at all times for Notre Dame.
My favorite Jags highlight was, I think, the first touchdown by Riley Leonard. He just throws somebody into the end zone and moves on to a double team. It was just like, get out the way, I'm on to the next guy. And it's like, okay. It's so funny hearing Notre Dame fans go back and forth about guard tackle with this kid. And him next to Stroud or Knapp, dude, it's going to be a really good combination. It's just going to be a really good combination.
Man, you want to talk about a happy quarterback. You're 4 and 24 are going to have a field day next season if you're running behind those two guys, 100%. Yeah. So I did forget to mention this at the start of the show. You'll have to forgive me. This is my first time steering the ship on a mailbag here. But if you guys do put in a super chat, mailbags are for everybody, right? And anybody, whether you're a subscriber to the boards, a Notre Dame fan, really anybody. I saw one come in from Archer. He's kind of like our house Ohio State fan that he comes in every show, talks ball, really great, awesome person. But if you do submit a super chat, those kind of get bumped to the top, Shaun. And there was a couple in here that we have here. So the first one, more of a statement, but it's from Stoney. He said, didn't get to catch you guys live after the game Monday. Keep up the work. Go Irish. So appreciate the super chat there, Stoney. There's a couple of other ones that we had in here. We have a super chat from AST12321. Does Notre Dame have the necessary depth and talent at defensive tackle now with the loss of Mills and Cross and presumably Onye, or will they seek another portal defensive tackle? Shaun, what do you think?
I'm going to trust this staff. And I will say this. This is the year. There are two coaches under the microscope, in my opinion. Mike Brown for recruiting purposes, because the 25 recruiting cycle, I won't put on Mike Brown. Now is the time. 26 class, this is all you. From a coaching standpoint, Al Washington goes under the microscope. Because now, these are your guys. Howard Cross, Riley Mills, and you get credit for development. You get credit for the backups coming in and playing at a level that allowed you to continue to be a top-notch defense. But now, these are your guys. These are the guys that you evaluated. These are the guys you recruited, landed. And now, a guy like Brendan Vernon, who was a really good big end in high school, now he's having to put on weight and move inside. Like, now I need to see how that works out. I need to see how Devin Houston works out. I need to see how Armel Mookum, does he finally take the step that we anticipate him to take? I know what you have on the ends. I know you have length and talent. I know you have Logan Thomas. I know you have Bryce Young. I know you had Traore returning. You got Botello returning, both hopefully healthy. But on the inside, Notre Dame, honestly, Trevor, and then I honestly, I just don't know if Notre Dame would ever be a program from a high school recruiting standpoint that will ever attract the best of the best, like a top 50 defensive tackle, 5-star. Can it happen? Sure, we'll see. But it's going to be tough, especially in the NIL landscape, right? With wide receivers and defensive tackles, you're going to have to pay that money for the top guys. And I'm not mad that Notre Dame is choosing not to jump into that cesspool of high school NIL. I have no problem with that. So now we're talking about, I love this staff, Trevor, because they're ever learning. They're ever learning. And they learn from their mistakes. and say, okay, we need to get better at this. I think Malachi Fields is an improvement from Bo Collins at the wide receiver position in the transfer portal. I think Dawson is an improvement from what they've done at defensive tackle previously in the transfer portal. The staff is ever learning. So they know what they need because they're honest about what they're possibly not going to be able to get via recruiting at that position. So I think the depth is good. Marcus Freeman talked about his scout team defensive line all year long. He talked about those young guys. So now is their time. Maybe not to be the top guys, but they have to be those support guys that get 10 to 12 snaps a game to make sure that the defense doesn't drop off. So really, yeah, they have the depth because your young guys are not going to be asked to be number ones, in my opinion. They're going to be asked to be the supplementary pieces and the depth pieces, not necessarily twos, but they need to be 1Bs that can go out there and give you quality 10 to 12 snaps every week. So from that perspective, yeah, I think they have enough depth.
You know, you go through and you look, and first and foremost, you said something that I could not agree with more. I don't care who the program is, and yes, I'm saying this through a Notre Dame lens because we're a Notre Dame show. Mm-hmm. I don't think, barring a kid like Jeremiah Smith or somebody like that you know is going to come in and make an immediate impact, I also don't like paying high school players just an insane bag of nil before they step foot onto a college campus because you just never know, right? And that's my thing. I'm all for, if you have to go out and get an elite player in the transfer portal, cool. It's just my opinion. It could be wrong, could be right, depending on who we're talking about here. But as far as the D-line depth, you go through and you look, and there's a lot of players that just have to continue to elevate where they're at. Because in the postseason, the thing that I find really interesting is we started to get an idea of what a Notre Dame defensive line was going to look like without R.J. Oben in his 5th or 6th year, Howard Cross in his 6th year, Riley Mills, not on the defensive line rotation due to injury. Yeah. And there were some moments, right? There was moments where people flashed. Junior Tuihalamaka stepped up. Donovan Hinish stepped up when Howard Cross went out in the regular season. Gabe Rubio against Georgia had a pretty decent game, honestly. Like there were moments where he flashed and he was all of the elite run stopper that we have believed him to be. But then you go through and you look at the depth, right? You have guys like Devin Houston, Armel Mukum, guys who are going to have to continue to elevate. But then when you add in Jared Dawson, you add in Elijah Hughes, those are some guys that you now pair with the Donovan Hinishes of the world, the Gabe Rubios of the world, to go through and develop talent. And so now you're starting to look at like 5 to 6 guys that could potentially be in that defensive tackle rotation. Now, to Shaun's point, none of those guys, in my opinion, right now, they could. I have no idea what 2025 is going to look like. But right now, you don't have those guys that could go and just transfer to like a Texas and become a day one starter along their defensive line, right? But what Riley Mills and Howard Cross shows is that through development, you can become an elite defensive tackle unit, especially when they're healthy, right? So that for me is what I'm going to be keeping an eye on. But the defensive line is something that throughout the offseason, I'm going to be watching with a microscope because outside of, when Junior Tuihalamaka would rotate in, Bryce Young, Logan Thomas, Josh Burnham, you are losing Riley Mills, you're losing Howard Cross, you're losing R.J. Oben. That's a lot of experience and a lot of snaps. Yeah. And right now, like I don't really know what's going on with Jason Onye. I know that he was dealing with things outside of injury, right? And so what's that going to look like? If Jason Onye returns to the team and whatever, you have another guy that's a 6'5", 290-pound plus interior defensive lineman. So a lot of question marks there. But to answer this super chat, I do think they have the depth. Now you just have to develop the talent that's there, that's in the room. Got another super chat here from Ethan Kaufman. Thank you for the super chat. Is there a date draft eligible players must declare by? Are there chances Ben Morrison comes back since he's injury prone?
Is Morrison injury prone? I don't know if I would label Ben Morrison as injury prone.
Yeah.
I don't even know if I want to say it in that manner, but I don't know if I would consider him football injury prone. Heck, Cam Hart was far more injury prone than Ben Morrison, in my opinion. But Ben Morrison this is once again having honest conversations. Why would Ben Morrison come? And this is the brotherhood. And I think without giving the scope, I'll use this story that I'm aware of to kind of explain this situation and how it embodies the Notre Dame brotherhood. When Malik Zaire decided to transfer, the main reason he transferred is because he realized the same thing that was being done to him was the same thing that was done to Ev, meaning Everett Golson, and his guy was Brandon Wimbush. That was his youngster. And he said, I refuse to participate in this being done to Brandon Wimbush. So I say that to say I highly doubt that Benjamin Morrison wants to stunt the growth of two kids. He has a fantastic relationship with Christian Gray, has literally taken Christian Gray under his wing. Ben Morrison Sr. speaks highly of Christian Gray and says Christian Gray just naturally is a better defensive back than my son. But he doesn't do certain things. He doesn't quite get the preparation part that's going to elevate him even more. That's how highly they think of Christian Gray. And then you have Leonard Moore, who just got to Notre Dame, so I don't think he has the same relationship that he has with Christian Gray. But Ben Morrison's not, for what? It would be selfish of Ben Morrison to come back. It would be selfish. He really is going to sit one of these guys on the bench or move them inside to nickel. I don't see it. That's just the brotherhood side of it, right? And just from the NFL standpoint, if he is injury prone, the time to go is now. Because he has enough tape to say, look, and to take the medicals to say, I'm good, I'm healthy, I'm ready to go. That's not a concern anymore. Look at my tape. I'm a first-round talent. I'm an All-American. Let's do it. That's it. That's the way I see it. There are two reasons why I think it makes no sense for him to come back. It just doesn't make sense in my opinion. Could he shock everyone and come back? Yeah. Would I love to have those three in the defensive back room? You darn right. You darn right. Figure it out. It's not for me to figure out. That's for Mike Mickens to figure out. So, but I just don't think he'll do it.
It kind of comes up what we've talked about, Shaun. I think we talked about this in the post game because I remember having this conversation with you about it, or we talked about this in the studio afterwards. But look, you look at a player like Benjamin Morrison, and I'm sorry, Ethan, to answer the first part of your super chat, they have to declare by Friday. So technically the date was January 15th, but for the players that played in the national championship, they have until the 24th. I saw Ryan Roberts put that in the chat as well. So it's the 24th. Now, with that being said, Ben Morrison, on top of the things that Shaun talked about, I don't know what more he has to give this program, right? You have your players that kind of turn certain schools into being known for a position. Nick Saban said that about Julio Jones. Alabama was not a premier target for wide receivers back in the early 2000s. Julio Jones committed to Alabama, completely changed the landscape. Now, anybody who's anybody at wide receiver will always look at Alabama because of Julio Jones laid the groundwork for the guys like Amari Cooper and Calvin Ridley and Devontae Smith and Jerry Jeudy, and the list goes on and on and on, right? Obviously, now Ryan Williams, I mean, 14 years after Julio Jones commits to Alabama, they're still getting guys like Ryan Williams. And I think players like Julian Love and Cam Hart, like they kind of opened the door to that possibility. I mean, Cam Hart came in as a receiver, didn't he? Mm-hmm. And so guys like Julian Love, when Cam Hart made the transition over, like they kind of opened the door to that realm of possibility. And Benjamin Morrison, I think, blew the door off of its hinges of like, hey, if you're an elite corner and you play well in the secondary, Notre Dame is absolutely a place that you need to go to develop your talent under Mike Mickens, under a really good defensive coaching staff. And so I don't know what more he has to give this program. Now, with that being said, I'm with Shaun. Because in a world where Notre Dame's starting corners from field, boundary, and nickel are some combination of Ben Morrison, Leonard Moore, and Christian Gray, as a fan, I can't really be upset about that. But then you have to take the kid's best interest at heart, right? What if he comes back and gets hurt? I don't think Ben Morrison is injury prone because he had 2 injuries in the same year. It typically players who are injury prone, you start to see that year over year over year. I don't really know if I want to label that like soft tissue stuff. Like, I mean, players deal with hamstrings, they deal with, Ben Morrison isn't getting sprained ankles every offseason, nothing like that. It's just this season he had the shoulder thing and then he had the hip thing. But again, would I be upset if he came back to see that defensive backfield? No, I wouldn't. But all that question will be answered by Friday. You know what I mean? We'll know by then.
And then, you look at, it just reminds me, sometimes you could look at certain things, because I remember a lot of Notre Dame fans when Blake Fisher decided to declare, like just hammering Blake Fisher, right? And I'm not too. There were certain things about the way he played last year on the film. No need to even get into that. But my thing was, it only takes one team. Like, regardless of what we think about, it only takes one team. One team thought he was worthy of a second-round pick, which made his decision the right decision, in my opinion. That's all it takes is one team. And so, as Benjamin Morrison goes through, I'm sure he'll hear, from the board, the advisory board, about the draft, where he stands. But all it takes is one team to say, we're not worried about that. We believe in the tape. And he fits what we do. We're asking him to do what we want to do. We like him. So that is really what it's really, in my opinion, it's an uphill battle to bring him back for Notre Dame, because they had to fight other teams off last offseason with NIL to retain Benjamin Morrison. So to allow him to come back, in my opinion, would be another NIL commitment or a continuation of the NIL commitment. And so all of these factors, you have to think about all of these factors, but they play a part.
Yeah, Nil makes that conversation a little bit more interesting, because then when you do have guys like Christian Gray and Leonard Moore coming back, you have guys like Mark Zachary and Dallas Golden that are coming in. You still have Carson Hobbs, who I heard had a really good postseason in practice, and he's starting to elevate his game. You start thinking about the bag that they would have to throw at Ben Morrison, and it does beg the question, like what a lot of NFL GMs have to worry about is like, could that money be spent elsewhere? Could it go to a defensive tackle? Could it go to another player in a position group where you do need that guy to come back, right? It begs all of those questions. So that one's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
Well, Shaun, that's going to do it for the Super Chat. So let's get back up to the top here and start rolling through some of these, man. ND, it just means more. Safety room seems young, but deep going into next season. Who are your 3 safeties, not name a Don, who would get the first crack at the open starting job?
Well, I think Stroman was going to come in definitely as one of those. Jadon Blair would definitely get a look. Safety position might be, I'm very interested, because they might, when the portal opens in the spring, safety might be one of those positions where they look to go add, or secondary, shall I say, where they add. But the pickup of Devontae Smith, I mean, they've done an incredible job in the portal, in my opinion, with the players that they've got. So I'll go Jadon Blair. Dallas Golden would definitely be in the mix for just about whatever position they want to be. Wide receiver, nickel, safety, what to do. He can do everything. And I think Luke Talmadge and Kenny Urlacher, there are some people that are going to be in the mix. That might be one of the most intriguing battles of the offseason. That safety position next to Don Shula, right? Because there's some talent there. There's definitely some talent there. But I think Kennedy, Talmadge, Jadon Blair, Dallas Golden, you don't even talk about a kid like an Ethan Long, who's long and athletic, that can come in and surprise. I mean, this is what Mike Mickens does, right? He finds guys and finds traits, and they come in ready to go. He gets them ready to go. Usually on the back end, you like to have, do you trust the leadership of a Don and what he was able to extract from Xavier Watts to put a youngster next to him, And I think Strowman, he's not Xavier Watts, but he's really good. He's really good, right? So if someone comes in and outplays him, then that lets you know what you're really getting next to a Don Shula. But right now, I think it's Shula Strowman right now. And then, you'll just see what a youngster in or some second, third year players where they can come in and add that, right? Because now everyone's flashed. That's the beautiful thing. Everyone we're talking about, other than the incoming freshmen, have flashed. Whether they flashed at the other schools before transferring in, or they've had opportunities to flash when they got the opportunity playing for Notre Dame. And that's the positive about it.
I think at the safety position for Notre Dame next year, you're going to see a lot more rotating than what you did this season. Because when you have a guy like Xavier Watts, you can't ask him to not be on the field. You know what I mean? Just from what he does in run support, from what he does obviously in coverage, it's too difficult to ask a kid like that to not be in for the majority of snaps, right? As of right now, the other person starting next to Adon's probably going to be Strowman, right? Mm-hmm. But this coaching staff has shown they brought in Rod Hurd to be starting next to Xavier Watts, and Adon Schuler elevated his game, and he ended up starting, right? And so I think when you have that type of spoil of riches at safety, and I use that term loosely just because it is very young, right? What does a Luke Talich look like when he's getting those meaningful minutes? What is Jadon Blair going to look like when he's playing at a college level? I have confidence in both of those guys, right? But you go through and you look at, you have Luke Talich, you have Jadon Blair, you have Jalen Stroman coming in, but then you can't forget about guys like Tay Johnson. You know what I mean? Like Tay Johnson. I mean, he's athletic enough to where they needed a two-deep corner, and they just moved him to corner. You know what I mean? Like Tay Johnson was another one of those kids like a Dallas Golden that they were like, hey, Marcus Freeman came on record and was like, hey, listen, like if he wanted to play wide receiver here, he could. I mean, he's that type of guy. Mm-hmm. You have guys like Tabron Benny Powell who could have seen minutes on special teams or in garbage time on defense this year if he didn't get hurt. And so I think you're going to see a lot more rotating because I think the safety room is going to be a room where you can't just have, like you did this year, just three guys rotating in between Xavier Watts, Adon Schuler, and Rod Hurd. I think they're going to put them into that type of position, which is a great position to be in as a coaching staff of, we have so many good players. We just have to play some of them for what they can do right. You have to go through and you have to earn the spot. They're not just going to play you because you have a lot of upside. You have to earn the playing time. But with that being said, there's a lot of guys that can see minutes at safety. But to answer your mailbag question here, three safeties that are not named Adon Schuler that would get the first crack. It has to be Jalen Stroman, Luke Talich, and Jadon Blair, in my opinion. But again, you can't sleep on the Kennedy Urlachers of the world. You can't sleep on the Tay Johnsons of the world because those guys are going to play some really good football for Notre Dame this year, man. Really good. USMA 87. Do playoff teams get to enter the portal still, especially in light of the situation with the Wisconsin receiver? Team wouldn't release him. So it was to my understanding that the teams that played in the playoffs got an additional 5 days once the portal closed after their game that they played, if their season didn't end while the transfer portal was closed, right? Like, does that make sense? So I think in the round one, out of the round one teams, I think the transfer portal was open for those, if my memory serves me correct.
Kurt Signetti and Notre Dame, without divulging too much, after the Notre Dame Indiana game, both teams handled portal business. Kurt Signetti said their kids that they were going to be hosting were waiting on them to get back to campus. So that just goes to show you, like, that's why the operation and the money that Notre Dame has invested in the total operation of the program has just been just as important to the elevation of the success of the program. Like, from the time you come into that building, now there's a feeling that everything in that building is about making the program and the players better. From administration, the coaching staff, strength and conditioning, everything is about making the players better and giving them the best of the best so they can maximize their ability. So that's a feeling that a lot of people can say possibly wasn't there over a decade ago, but I'm really excited that it's there today. So, yeah, that's just part of it. And Notre Dame was very much active while they were winning, just as Indiana was active and preparing for that weekend of, going into the portal, hosting guys, all of that. The Wisconsin thing was, from what I heard from my guy Evan Flood, that Wisconsin thing, that was a lot of underlying stuff that went into that situation and how it played out.
Gotcha. I gotcha. And then USMA 87, to answer the tail end of your question here too. Like Notre Dame, teams that played in the national championship have until Friday to announce that they get an additional 5 days from the game. So they have essentially this week to announce if they're entering the transfer portal or if they're declaring for the draft.
But the discussion is the culture of this program. And Trev, you can correct me. I know Ryan's in the chat. Just from my experience, because I was speaking of guys coming in. I think the question was about guys going out and jumping into the portal. I think Marcus Freeman spoke to that. On other teams, he spoke to that after the Indiana game. It's like where everybody else is having that issue. When you're at Notre Dame, that goes back to the conversation we had with the transfers. Like Notre Dame's just different. That's why you don't see underclassmen jumping in the portal until they have gotten that close to make sure they're going to get the degree. That's why Sam Pendleton is an outlier, right? Marcus Freeman's like, we don't have to deal with that. There are no transfer portal conversations going on. We're focused on football games and winning the playoff. And that's because Notre Dame is different. And what allows them to be different is the way they handle their business in recruiting. They don't recruit players that don't want to be at Notre Dame.
Right.
Don't jump into the cesspool of pay for play. They don't jump into the cesspool of this is the reason outside of wanting to play for Notre Dame and seeing the full context of what this school adds to you outside of the NFL. Those are the type of kids that's why you get the Deion Colesys and the Jaden Thomases. That's why those stories end up coming out as they jump into the transfer portal, because Notre Dame handles their business differently. And it causes people, whether it's outside of the fan base or inside the fan base, to kind of roll the eyes a little bit at the way they handle. Somebody in the chat said, Notre Dame can afford to pay anybody. Yeah, but they're not. They have a budget, and they're not going to change that budget. They have a way to do business. As the former AD said, we're good stewards, and they're not changing that. They're not changing that. So they're not going to operate by the same fiscal budgets of other schools and programs when it comes to football. And I actually tip my cap to them that they're going to be who they are. They're going to continue to be the outlier, and they're not going to devalue themselves and who they are as an institution just to make sure that they have success. That's not guaranteed. That money that Ohio State paid worked out for them, but it didn't guarantee a thing. They still had to go out there, and they lost 2 games in the regular season. We can't forget that. So nothing is guaranteed. And I tip my cap to the way this university locks in to whom they are. But I'm glad I didn't know that they had the 5 days after for kids to jump in. But I don't think that's something that Notre Dame really had to even deal with the entire time that they were in the playoffs. I think the conversations, Marcus Freeman has those conversations late in the season. This is not something that Sam Pendleton has just come to. Information and conversations, Marcus Freeman says, we talk to our players all the time, consistently about where they stand in this program throughout the season. So there has been collecting the information for everyone on this roster to know, even going into the playoffs, where they stand. And the kids in the program locked in and said, we're here. While other programs that were in the playoffs were losing guys, Notre Dame and their players said, we're locked in and we'll deal with that once the season is over. So that speaks volumes about the quality of kids that are in this program, but also the way Marcus Freeman runs things with a lot of honesty and integrity. And that's all you can ask for as a parent, as a kid, as an athlete. That's all you can ask for.
Well, look, Marcus Freeman has found a way to do right by the kids and the program, which is a really hard line to walk,
Yeah.
right? Because sometimes you have too much of one or the other side,
Hmm.
right? You have the coaches that just want to be everybody's friend and wants everybody to like them, and then you have the other coaches on the flip side where it's just like, hey, I'm bringing you in because you can help this program, and if you
Yeah.
can, awesome. If not, see ya. And that Marcus Freeman has found a way to elevate his team, find a way to put team glory first while still keeping in mind the best interests of his players.
Yeah.
Now, as a head coach, you have decisions to make. Sometimes the best decision for your player is you ask them to come back. Hey, we think that you can contribute to the team in this way. We think there's aspects of your game that we can help you with, right?
Hmm.
Look at Cam Hart. He made the decision to come back in 2023. Now what's he doing? He's starting for the Los Angeles Chargers. I don't know if that happens if he leaves after 2022. But in the same light, you also have to look at it and say, sometimes the best thing that you can do for a kid is let him go free. Go be at a program. Because look, you're not going to do somebody a favor just to keep him in the blue and gold if he's going to be sitting on the bench or playing special teams as a fifth-year senior. That's not helping them elevate their game, in my opinion, right? Because you also have to keep the kids' best interest at heart. And I think the Notre Dame Ohio State National Championship game is a perfect example as to why both methods work. There's a lot of people talking about Ohio State bought their team and yada, yada, yada. Well, like Notre Dame, I think, brought in more transfers than what Ohio State did. Ohio State just brought in more blue chip transfers, right? Ohio State gave Caleb Downs a good amount of money. They gave Will Howard a good amount of money. They gave Quinshon Judkins a good amount of money. You know what I mean? So you go through and you look at that, and there is a difference. Like there is a difference between bringing in Caleb Downs and Rod Hurd. Like it just is, right? But you go through and look, both teams made it to the national championship. Despite all the mistakes that were made Monday night, Notre Dame was a 3rd and 11 stop away from potentially getting the ball back and having an opportunity to tie the game to force overtime, right? And so Marcus Freeman, to me, has done a really, really good job of walking that line between elevating his program and doing what is in the best interest of Notre Dame football and doing what's in the best interest of his kids, which I think is a really hard line to walk. Really hard line to walk. We have a couple more super chats in here. We have one super chat from Riley Welker. Thank you, Riley. I think that you feel confident in the future that those 3-star dudes are guys that they see potential in, not just a situation of, oh, who's left. Yeah, totally. So, I mean, if there's one thing that this coaching staff has shown is that they're a really good evaluator of talent and they are really good at developing talent. There's some that are better than others. There's some where the sample size is too small. I don't know what Mike Brown's going to look like developing talent. You know what I mean? I saw what Jaden Greathouse did in the Orange Bowl in the national championship game. You see guys like Jordan Faison, who spends half of his year on the lacrosse team. We see what he can do. You know what I mean? But I think now we're going to get a full offseason cycle of Mike Brown. Bo Collins came out and said that when he came and took his visit at Notre Dame, it was Mike Brown's second day on the job. Now he has an entire offseason. But to your point about the 3-star recruits, you go through and you look at what Mike Mickens did with Leonard Moore, who is way above a 3-star recruit, by the way, if nobody had noticed that. But you go through and they're a really good evaluator of talent, and I think the days of Notre Dame got this 3-star guy because they needed to fill a class and they needed to get up to a number that they wanted. Not only are they reaching the numbers that they want, they're doing it with players that they want and want to come to Notre Dame. And so I think that's a big difference that I've seen, Shaun. What about you, man?
You're spot on with that. And I think the evaluation process is what we need to worry about, right? I tell people all the time, I can go down a list of 4 and 5 stars that amounted to nothing every year. Is the hit rate higher? Yes. It was a great article in The Athletic, I think a couple of years ago, where offensively, if you allow those 5 stars to get to the NFL, those that make the all-pro teams on the offensive side of the ball, it means less. On the defensive side of the ball, where defense is more about the physical traits, you have a higher hit rate of guys being really good in college and then transferring those skills onto the NFL, right? So when it comes to evaluation, you have to know Mike Mickens is a perfect example. You have to know what you're looking for, because he's looking for what works in connection with what Al Golden wants to do. What does Al Golden want to do? He wants to play man-to-man and pressure. So therefore, you need to go find long, athletic defensive backs that can run and can cover, and that like to play man-to-man, bump and run. He has a great eye to be able to evaluate kids that can do that. Dallas Golden, Greg Thomas, Leonard Moore. People weren't talking about Leonard Moore like that. Remember when he got the start for Christian Gray in the Louisville game? We were like, oh, man. Which is so funny, Trevor, because when that happened and people found out that Christian Gray was injured going into the Louisville game, people were like, oh, man, we got a true freshman like Christian Gray. Is a huge loss. And now Christian Gray is like, oh, can we switch him to wide receiver? It's like, dude, the fickleness of fans, bro. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. But yes, that's who Mike Mickens had in his back pocket the whole time. And Brian will tell you, we were watching one of the first practices and we were like, okay, Leonard Moore is going to be a dude. It's the exact same thing we said after watching 2 practices of Benjamin Morrison. It's like, yo, Mike Mickens has an eye for talent. Stop worrying about the stars. He has a great eye for talent that can come into this defense and do what they need to be done at the defensive back position. So everyone just needs to just step back and a truth for them. You're not going to get as much 5- and 4-star top 50 action as other schools. It's Notre Dame. Stop asking for it. Stop. Ask for difference makers, regardless of the star. Ask the coaching staff to go find difference makers.
Yes.
And they can be found.
Yes.
At all levels.
Evaluate the talent, not the recruiting ranking.
Yes.
That is what I always tell people. Look, you go through and you think of like the notable athletes that have performed great in the NFL and that performed outstanding in college. And, you have your some like one-off stories of like the J.J. Watts of the world who were like no-star recruits or 2-star recruits or whatever that came in and they were a tight end at Central Michigan, then went to Wisconsin and did. Look, I'm not saying that Notre Dame should only go after those guys, right? Mm-hmm. But you go through and you look at, even who they played in the playoffs, right? You go through and you look at, Georgia. Georgia had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Georgia had 7 players with a 5-star rating that were in their starting lineup or key rotational guys, to Notre Dame's 0. Notre Dame won 23-10. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Penn State had 5 guys who had 5-star ratings coming out of high school. Who won that game? Mm-hmm. Developing talent, identifying really good talent is what wins football games.
Absolutely.
Recruiting rankings, I don't pay much attention to. Plus, you also have to factor in, you have certain outlets that will move up or move down a player's recruiting rankings based off of where they commit to. It's just the fact of the matter.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a firm believer that if a 4-star kid like Jeremiah Love committed to somewhere down in the SEC, he's not staying a 4-star for that much longer. Just not. If you go and you watch the kid play in high school, what he did in the state championship game, that rating gets boosted up. So, look, for me, I don't put too much weight into 5-star rankings. I think it just means more to some programs to say, hey, 5-star recruits come here. Yeah. But I think people often assume that if you have a 5-star player, they're just bona fide for sure to work out more than a 3 or 4-star kid. And that's just not the case.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
And just, I think sometimes you take a step back. I think people forget. I mentioned that Louisville game. There's a reason why you saw Christian Gray come back immediately from that injury, because not too long after that, a certain starting defensive back was gone for the season. And if that didn't take place, you might not see. It's the same. It's very similar, because I remember the hate that Cam Hart got from the same fan base, Trevor. Remember, Cam Hart was supposed to be trash going into his senior season. He's overrated. He got burned. He keeps getting burned. Some of the same things we're hearing about Christian Gray, and all of a sudden Cam Hart comes back to senior year and he plays better statistically than Benjamin Morrison. And all of a sudden everybody's like, oh, we love. That's why you have to relax as a fan base. Because Cam Hart was playing through injury. maybe Christian Gray was playing through something that he came back a lot earlier because there was a need. But I'll just leave it at that. I'll just add a little context. That's all. So all of this, hate, like we have a similar situation with Cam Hart receiving some of the same vitriol from the fan base because they said he was being burnt. That's being sent to 29. And Cam Hart, just like 29, I think 29 is probably going to respond the same way the following year as Cam Hart. That's why I say relax. Relax.
I'm with that entirely. We got another super chat in here from Riley Welker. Thank you for the super chat. Leonard Moore and BMO, just an incredible sign. Yeah, I agree with you, man. Mm-hmm. I absolutely agree with you. I mean, this team is going to be poised to continue to develop and identify great talent. They will. And I'm absolutely on board with that one. Another super chat here from Lisa Robinson. Thank you, Lisa. What happened to the big defensive lineman from Ohio? He was highly rated. Any chance of flipping Keon Keeley?
Is that Brendan Vernon Lisa speaking of?
Maybe
Lisa. He was highly rated.
Yeah, maybe Lisa. Maybe.
He was a big end. For whatever reason, that position didn't work. So now he's working on adding weight to move to the interior. No. From what I've heard recently, Keon Keeley is kind of adjusted and gotten his head on straight and is kind of locked in my opinion.
Good deal. I mean, it's one of those where I thought he should have committed to Notre Dame at the time because I think it fit more of what he needed at the time. Mm-hmm. But you always want the kid to see him succeed, and he was a really great talent. And if he can do it down in Tuscaloosa, he can do it down in Tuscaloosa, right? I would have just preferred if he did it in South Bend. That would have been pretty cool.
I think that's the thing, right? I think he knew, and this would probably come out later down the line. I think he knew he made a mistake when they went to the Army All-American Bowl. Mm. And I think Ryan Roberts could speak to this because he was actually down there. It was like you make a decision, you have to live with it, but man, this wasn't the right decision. I think, Keon Keeley, maybe that kind of haunted him even early on in his career. But I think now he's locked in. I wish him nothing but the best.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Super chat in here from Michael S. Thank you, Michael. Kelly's offensive scheme seemed more creative than Denbrock's. Was Notre Dame's scheme too bland against Ohio State? No. So, look, Michael, we
talk about it.
Look, man, we did a breakdown of this yesterday and upon further review. And here's the thing that you got to understand. The stuff that was there in the second half of the national championship game was there in the first half, right? You look at this season as a whole and what you asked Mike Denbrock to do. He had to put together and formulate a passing offense with a couple transfer portal receivers that didn't pan out the way that you thought. And I'm like, that's no shot at Bo Collins. That's no shot at Chris Mitchell. But all things on the table, you go back through and you look at, they were building relationships and chemistries in the spring with a quarterback that wasn't going to be their starter on August 31st in College Station. Riley Leonard didn't get to participate in the spring because he had two separate lower extremity surgeries, right? To fix the ankle, fix the foot, whatever it was. But the scheme was not bland. You go through and you look at what Notre Dame did on the second drive, and they were execution here, execution there, away from putting together a drive. I'm not going to play the what-if game. I don't know if they would have scored on that drive. I know they would have given the defense more than a 3 and out of time to adjust. I know that. I know on the third drive of the game, if Riley Leonard sees Eli Raridon coming over once he broke off a snag route, that play goes for a minimum 12 yards and a first down. I know that if he hits Bo Collins on an underneath drag route on a play where he should have hit Jaden Greathouse on a slot fade where he absolutely cooked Jordan Hancock and Caleb Downs was not in a spot to go and cover him over top, I know that that's a 27-yard gain. So, look, it's really easy whenever an offense doesn't perform well to point the finger at where the buck stops, right? But you got to understand something. If your team's not executing, on the second drive of the game, they had a 5-man pressure, Ohio State did, against a 5-man pass protection. Pat Coogan sticks his left arm out like he's looking for a blitzer, nobody to the shade to his right in the A-gap because he's engaged with Rocco Spindler, and Cody Simon literally could have just walked across the line of scrimmage and still gotten a pressure on Riley Leonard because he was untouched. So I don't know from a schematic standpoint what you want Mike Denbrock to do. There was no lack of creativity. There was no, because here's the thing. If your offense, and Shaun, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but if I'm a coordinator and my offense isn't executing on a G scheme pull to get your right guard to the outside, if your starting quarterback is sailing 5-yard drag routes, I don't know what the expectation is then of Mike Denbrock. He was calling the right plays for that time. And still, you got to tip your cap to Ohio State for taking advantage of when Notre Dame had miscues. Because in a game where the talent is that evenly matched, if you make a mistake, it's that much more magnified. You can't get away with it like you got away with it against IU. You can't get away with it like you got away with it against USC or Louisville or, you know what I mean, or Navy or Army. Yeah. But it's when you're not executing on base offensive plays, I don't think that's the time to start calling out double passes to get more creative and try to stretch the defense out. Like that's just me. That's just me.
Yeah, it amazes me. You can go deeper than that, right? Because there was so much blame thrown at Coach Freeman. So many narratives thrown out there. He doesn't want to throw the ball. He doesn't want to score. He's limiting the offense. Give him talent that can do said things, and I'm sure he's very open to doing that. Right? I'm sure you're going to see Malachi Fields get a lot of balls next year.
Man.
Because he's extremely talented. I'm sure Jaden Greathouse has proven himself to say, okay, so like you said, did Jaden Greathouse not perform this year, or was Jaden Greathouse's opportunities limited because of certain things offensively? Did Mike Denbrock do an incredible job midstream of redirecting this offense so that it could win games? Or was he not as creative as Brian Kelly? Like, did Notre Dame get what they thought they were going to get, particularly at the quarterback position? Or did they realize, like, that's not who we thought we were getting, but we still have to find a way to use what he can do best to win football games? I tip my cap. Trevor, we talked, look, same situation last year. Offense should have been figured out in the middle of the season. Unfortunately, you didn't have a coordinator that had the capability and experience to stop midstream and redirect the offense in the direction that will help the quarterback. So Mike Denbrock, in my opinion, should be applauded for what he was able to do. If he had to, streamline things, and if that made it look less creative, but it was effective enough to get to the national championship game, then you know what? Tip your cap and say, man, we appreciate it. And I'm glad, Trevor, you spoke that. I've been saying it since middle of the season. Like, hey, this is what it is. You can love 13. You can love the person he is. You can love what he brings and how tough, all of that. Trevor and I are ready for a quarterback that can advance this passing game. That's it. Mm-hmm. And that's not saying anything disparaging about 13. Nothing at all. Appreciate everything he gave to this program and how he led and put us on the precipice of winning a national championship. But for Notre Dame to take the next step, the quarterback position has to get better at passing the ball. Has to. And that's not on Mike Denbrock. We can talk about great coaches. I don't know a great coach that didn't have great players, Trevor. I don't know one. You go across the sports landscape, name the greatest coaches. I guarantee you they had a litany of Hall of Famers, great players connected to them. That's it. Especially in football. Most great coaches win with great quarterbacks.
Listen,
great
man.
Quarterback play.
Listen, man. It is. You're not going to convince me that Ed Orgeron was an offensive mind when he had Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson and Terrace Marshall and Randy Moss's kid and Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Wait a minute. Didn't Ed Orgeron go get the same offensive mind that has transformed Josh Allen into a more efficient quarterback that's playing in the AFC Championship game this
Joe
weekend?
Brady?
Wasn't that the guy that running the offensive show?
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Yep. I'm with you, man. I'm with you. Look, the last thing that I'll say is Mike Denbrock, this is not the style of offense that he wanted to come in and run, but the mark of a great coach is adjusting to something that you didn't have in mind. And he was still Notre Dame was a top 10 scoring team in college football this year.
Mhm.
That's one thing that I don't think people understand. Ohio State finished 12th. Notre Dame finished 10th. So that's what he was able to do running an offense that he didn't have in mind when he came to South Bend. Riley Leonard was committed to Notre Dame before Mike Denbrock was hired. And then he had a quarterback that missed the spring.
Oh, man.
Look, guys, the Mike Denbrock slander's got to go. It has to. And I'm saying that right now, live at 2:30 in the afternoon on January 22nd. Give this guy some time. Because if I remember correctly, there was a lot of people that were disgruntled with Al Golden after 2022 in his first year. And it was still a pretty decent defense. And we saw what that turned into. Give the guy some time.
You know why they were upset? You know what got them upset that year? The end of the Ohio State game and how the season ended against USC on the road with Caleb Williams. But guess what? He had 3 starting defensive backs out against USC and Caleb Williams. Nobody thought about that, though. Nobody thought about that. I don't care how great your scheme is. If you don't have players, that scheme is dead. It means nothing. Play calling me. Mike Denbrock called great plays in the first half. Didn't have a quarterback that can complete the passes. The scheme doesn't mean a thing. Play call doesn't mean a thing. Trevor just gave you 3 to 4 examples of wide open receivers and opportunities to get big plays against Ohio State in the first half. Unfortunately, the quarterback didn't get it done. That's not on Mike Denbrock. That is not on Mike Denbrock.
Play calling and scheme.
That's not.
Play calling and scheme have nothing to do with execution.
No.
Nothing to do with execution.
No.
Look, and I'm not trying to paint this picture of if this guy did this and this guy did this and this guy did this and Riley did this and this receiver did this. No, literally, if Rocco Spindler blocks outside of the shade of Charles Jagusah on 2nd and 25, Jadarian Price might have put them in 3rd and 2.
Absolutely.
I'm talking about if Riley sees Eli Raridan come off of his snag route while he had time in the pocket, that goes for a first down and moves the chains, right? I'm talking about if Pat Coogan identifies that Cody Simon is coming on a late blitz and just gets a hand on him, Riley Leonard wouldn't have to leave the pocket. Charles Jagusah gets a hold because Riley rolls out left, and then you're not in 2nd and 25. Like that, it's little things like that. Play calling has nothing to do with that, in my opinion. Like I don't know how you can watch how that game unfolded.
There are contributaries everywhere. I've said this before. If Charles Jagusah is your left tackle, Riley Leonard plays better early in the season. I stand on that. He feels much more comfortable in the pocket in the first half of the season if 56 is his left tackle. And I think the evidence from the 2 games that Charles Jagusah played in would lend everybody to say, yeah, you're probably right. And that matters. That matters as a quarterback. Because it's enough to think about the play, your progression. When you have to worry about your backside, play after play after play, and whether or not you have to scramble. Yeah, he eliminated a lot of sacks, and he missed a lot of opportunities for big plays as well. So that goes hand in hand.
100%. Got another super chat here from Riley Welker. Thank you, Riley. Just for fun out of the okay, this will be a quick one. Just for fun out of the transfer quarterbacks, who do you think would have elevated this team the most this year? I feel like Leonard was exactly what they needed. Look, in the grand scheme of the transfer portal, based on this team specifically and the makeup of the offensive line and what that looked like for them, Riley Leonard was absolutely the quarterback that they needed. Because as a passer, like I do think that people still underrate him as a passer. He missed people in the first half of the Orange Bowl and in the national championship. But when Riley Leonard hit that F-it moment and was just like, I'm going to just let that thing fly, he had back-to-back games where he had over 200 passing yards in one half.
That's the fact.
And that comes with the development in the spring. Because instead of waiting until the national championship to do that, instead of waiting until the Orange Bowl in the second half to do that, that starts to come against Stanford. That starts to come against Virginia. That starts to come against Georgia Tech. But there were moments throughout the season where he just didn't feel uncomfortable. And sometimes you can't blame him because on quick game, he had somebody driven back into his lap before he hit the top of his drop. So Yes, Riley Leonard for this team was exactly what they needed. He finished the season with 18 rushing touchdowns as a quarterback. Don't know if you can ask a kid to do any more than that.
And I'll say this, because a lot of people will take, things that we say in critique of Riley Leonard and misrepresent it as hate. So I'm just going to show you how much I believe in Riley Leonard. If the two quarterbacks switch teams on Monday night, Ohio State still wins the championship. Matter of fact, if Riley Leonard is the quarterback of Ohio State, they beat Michigan, in my opinion. Because I think he has something that Will Howard doesn't have. That's just my opinion. So if I can't utter anything else that shows a greater respect for who that young man is as a competitor and as a quarterback. But we can be fair and pragmatic and look at both sides of the coin when it comes to the offense. But he was definitely what this team needed. This was my question. Before he came to Notre Dame, I was one that said, I'm ready to start the clock. I don't want to go to the portal. I'm ready to start the clock because the schedule is soft in comparison to the schedule coming up in 2025. If you're going to do it with an inexperienced offensive line, this is the year to do it. I said on the flip side, if I'm Marcus Freeman and I believe in this team and I want to win, then I go get me a veteran quarterback that gives me the ability to take advantage of the weak offensive line and use the legs to take pressure off that offensive line. So, Trevor, you're right. He was the perfect fit for this season, and it was only magnified as the offensive line went through injuries. Yes, he did what he did. And at the end of the day, I'm still sitting here saying I want a passing quarterback that can elevate the passing game. Doesn't change. That doesn't change a thing. He was everything the 2024 iteration of Notre Dame football needed. Wouldn't want anybody else. His attitude fit, who he was as a leader fit. I don't know how Cam Ward would have fit into this locker room. I don't know. I can sit up there and say the bazooka arm, love it. The ability to scramble, love it. But he takes a lot of chances. Did I really want that as complementary to this defense? I can't say that I do. So that, for me, Riley Leonard, perfect. It was absolutely the perfect pick. Marcus Freeman, you were right. When guys like me were ready for the youngsters to take their helm, you were right. You made the right decision. You and your staff. He was perfect.
Agreed. I agree completely. We got one last super chat in here before we get back to the regular mailbag questions. I'm just going to pull it up because I appreciate the super chat. It's from King Bronco, Walter White style. And the only thing that I'll say to this one is I appreciate the super chat. And the next time that you come into this chat, I hope that you have an aspiration to talk ball and not whatever nonsense this is. So thank you for the super chat. Back to the mailbag questions. We've got one from Kevin Park. There's been criticism of Denbrock's play calling. Shouldn't some of the blame go on the man in the booth, Guidugli?
Don't you feel like this is really the first year that we get to pin anything directly on Gino Guidugli? I mean, Sam Hartman was a transfer. Riley Leonard was a transfer. Riley missed the spring. It's like Kenny Minchie, CJ Carr, Steve Angeli. That's when you really get to see the impact of Gino Guidugli. Not that he gets a pass. That's not what I'm saying. Not saying that at all. But what I'm saying is now we really get to see what he can do with young quarterbacks. This is one of those microscope years. Like, okay, now the light is shining brightly on you, sir. Let's see what your guys are able to do. Not guys that came from other situations already kind of developed under a certain tutelage. These are your guys that have been under your tutelage. Let's see what you have. So for me, I don't know how that connects to Denbrock because Denbrock is the boss. Mike Denbrock is the boss. You have a quarterback coach, but Mike Denbrock has coached that position as well. So
yep. I was about to say.
He's the bosses of bosses.
Yep. I mean, look, man, Joe Rudolph could see something. Mike Brown could see something. Gino Guidugli could see something. That goes through the man.
Yeah.
That goes through the man on the sideline. The one thing that I will say to this, Kevin, that is an area of concern that does concern Gino Guidugli, and this was before Mike Denbrock was in town. In back-to-back years, you had two transfer portal quarterbacks that digressed as passers when they got to South Bend.
Mm-hmm.
Sam Hartman was doing things and not pulling the trigger on some of the same throws that what Riley Leonard refused to pull the trigger on. That is something that needs addressed in the offseason. Yeah. I am all for taking care of the football. I am all for treating the football sacred. But if there's going to be a fear of throwing an interception by pushing the ball down the field, just become a triple option team. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, look, at some point, Deshaun Watson, one of the best college quarterbacks that I got to watch in my lifetime in that 2015 and 2016 season at Clemson, threw 17 interceptions the year that they won the national championship. But Dabo Swinney went on record after he was asked, are you going to ask Deshaun to stop forcing some throws and putting it into harm's way like that? And his resounding answer was no, because that's also what makes him great.
Yeah.
And so if there is one thing that I would like to see an adjustment on from Gino Guidugli, and I can't take credit for this because Brian brought this up in one of the last shows, but I thought it was a fitting time to bring this back up, is you can't continuously ask your quarterbacks, especially guys with live arms like Kenny and CJ, to hold it in and not pull the trigger on something that is available downfield when you have quarterbacks with the arm to do it, right? Now, maybe there was instances in the evaluation of Sam Hartman and Riley Leonard where they didn't believe that they had the arm to make some of these throws. There could be some truth to that, right? But the ones where players are wide open, more than 15 yards down the field, there was one play where there was a perfect alley to throw. Jaden Greathouse ran a perfect deep comeback route. Trigger wasn't pulled. You can't get a better alley. I could literally pull up the screenshot that Brian had on the screen yesterday and draw an alley, like a literal 2-lane highway to Jaden Greathouse for how wide open he was, and the trigger wasn't pulled on that one. Those are the balls that have to come out. So that's something that I saw from the quarterbacks in 2 different years now. And that's something that I hope starts to turn around now that Mike Denbrock is going to have a full off season under his belt. The spring and the winter isn't going to be spent on the get to know yous and developing the staff. And it's hey, it's go time. I'm here. This is what the new standard's going to be. So I think that's going to be the turnaround. I really do, Kevin. Domer Grizz, I'm sure you'll spend whole shows breaking this down, but off the top of your head, what 2 areas need the most focus during the offseason to make a repeat appearance in next year's national championship game?
Passing game. Big plays in the passing game. That's number 1 for me. And I'm going to go off the trail a little bit and say I need more from special teams, especially in the return game. You went out and got Jaden Harrison, big time return to start the second half against Georgia. Huge, especially the way that game was played. But I need more. I need to see a playmaker returning punts. Like you have to use, as Notre Dame, a school like Notre Dame cannot afford to use every opportunity in every area of the team to make an impact. It's not just good enough to fair catch it and get 4 or 5 yards. We need to find somebody that's dangerous, that can give us legitimate opportunities each and every game, each and every attempt to put points on the board, right? Miss Jeter struggled, injury. We need to solidify the place kicking. We need someone, I would like someone that's going to be here for the next 2 or 3 years that's going to be dependable, that's going to be a Reggie Holt, going back to the Lou Holtz days, right? He might not be able to kick it 56 yards, but if you get him 48 and in, it's automatic, right? So they've done a great job blocking kicks and doing all of that stuff, but the other areas of special teams, and one thing, James Rendell really came on at the end of the year, and that's going to be one of the bright spots and positives going into next season, his return as a punter. But special teams needs to take a step forward, in my opinion. Special teams taking a step forward because you have defense. You predict that the offense is going to be able to put up more points, but I need big plays in the passing game and that passing game to take a step forward. And then the other areas of special teams to be more consistent and make an impact on the football game week to week.
For me, I agree with everything you said about special teams. For me, it comes down to a downfield passing attack. That's the one thing that's been missing from this offense for quite some time. You make the argument that you saw moments of it in 2021 with Jack Cohn. There were some offensive line issues that I think kind of plagued that a little bit. We already addressed what it kind of looked like in 23 and some of this year. Yes, I saw somebody brought it up in the chat. The wide receiver issues were there, but there were more times than not that they were open downfield and the trigger was not pulled. I beg you to go back and watch some of the film breakdowns that Brian put on the message boards to go see some of that. I'm not saying, and I'm not here claiming that Notre Dame had a 2019 LSU receiving core, a 2024, 2023 Ohio State receiving core, an Alabama receiving core. I'm not staking that claim, but they were open and the trigger was not pulled on some throws that you have to be able to see. So that was my only point there. But yes, number one for me is the downfield passing game. Two, the defensive line needs addressed, whether that's the health and overall productivity of that group, or it's evaluating the talent and putting people in the best position for them to succeed. You already brought up Brennan Vernon. I thought he was going to be a better fit at big end. He's at 270 pounds right now. He is 6'5", and he has more length, but a 270-pound interior defensive tackle is I'm not going to call it a liability because guys like Donovan Heinisch had success this year, right? Howard Cross goes down and Donnie Heinisch stepped in, and his motor and his skill and his quick hands and his quick first step racked him up, and I think he finished the season as second place on the team in sacks. But what failed you in the national championship game was you weren't able to dial up and the defensive line wasn't able to get any pressure. So the two for me, downfield passing game and the defensive line are something that needs some focus to make a repeat appearance, because you can go back through and look at that game and say those were the two areas in the national championship that you needed an additional help. Jaden Greathouse had a heck of a game.
Yeah.
You need that other factor.
Yeah.
Right? Enter a Malachi Fields, enter a Jordan Faison with a fully healthy year, enter a Will Pauling, Micah Gilbert. The list goes on and on. So downfield passing for me is another one. Domer Grizz with another one in here. He says, how much of a factor do you feel Golden's interviews with the Bengals played in the defense looking less prepared and locked in than usual? Look, I'll say this. Based on the game plan that the defense had, I genuinely think Al Golden believed that it was going to work. I don't think him going, which is another issue in and of itself. But I don't think he just threw together some makeshift thrift store game plan because he spent too much time in Cincinnati hanging out with Zach Taylor. I don't believe that was it. There was question marks about the scheme that I just didn't understand. I mean, you're slanting a three-man front to the boundary and giving Will Howard a four-lane highway area to run and pick up 14 yards, which he did. On third down, it's stuff like that where, we've already talked about what he asked Christian Gray to do. We already talked about what you're asking Jack Kaiser to do in coverage. And players were clearly uncomfortable with the scheme that they were asked to do. But when Al Golden said that all of his focus was on the national championship game, I believed it. This coaching staff, when they say things, I don't believe it to be coach speak. When Marcus Freeman talks about elevating and team glory and putting his efforts and faith into the players that he has, into the coaching staff that he has, I think that's real. When Al Golden says things like, we're going to be ourselves and we're going to do these things, all my focus is on this team, I believe that, and I still do to this day. I just think it was a bad game plan. But I don't think he just threw it together because he got back to South Bend the night before the plane took off because he was hanging out down on the river in Cincinnati and was like, ooh, I should probably get a game plan ready for the national championship. It's not like that at all. So to answer your question, Domer Grizz, I don't think I don't think that's what it was. Shaun, what about you?
Yo, you hit it perfectly from the game plan standpoint. I'm going to tip my cap to Chip Kelly and Ryan Day.
Yeah.
In a big game, no one ever thought that Ryan Day would have the cojones to run the ball 40 times. That's what he did with his two running backs and his quarterback. He ran the ball 40 times. That is not Ryan Day. All season, we have applauded on this show and post games Al Golden's ability to make the best play callers do what they don't want to do and to force them to see if they can stick to it. He did it against Brom. He did it against Lincoln Riley. He did it against the best offenses that they face, the multiple offenses. We're not going to let you do what you do best. Let's see if you can do your secondary stuff for 4 quarters. Ohio State did it. It's plain and simple. So it can make his plan look like it was a bad plan, but tip your cap to Chip Kelly and Ryan Day saying, we know he's going to force us to run the ball to win. So guess what? They're not expecting us to run the ball to win. So that's what we're going to do, and we're going to allow the passing game to play off of that and get Will Howard comfortable. And that's what happened. He didn't have any pass rush. They had a lot of max protect to go against the blitzes. Will Howard had time, and he did what he did. So, yeah, it was a bad game plan, but it was also a bad game plan combined with a great game plan from Ohio State.
Man.
It really was.
That touchdown pass to Jeremiah Smith was something of beauty. Chip Kelly looked at the tendencies that they had because, look, Brian broke this down yesterday and upon further review, but Christian Gray was jumping up and down and screaming that he saw Jeremiah Smith going in motion. Christian Gray takes off, not to cover Igbuka in the slot, but to run with Jeremiah Smith because he identified something that he saw on film and was going to that tendency. Chip Kelly saw their own tendency, went against it, motioned him in on the fastest zipper motion I've ever seen in my life, and then angled him back out, and there was nobody within 15 yards of him. Yeah. That's just great play calling.
It's great play calling, right? We saw the Chiefs do it in the Super Bowl against the Eagles to win a Super Bowl, right? The same play was ran against Ryan Day in Ohio State with Devontae Smith and Sark in 2020 at Alabama. Like you stockpile those things, right? Those are the plays you stockpile for those situations. And then we saw from Mike Denbrock. People talk about his creativity. Mike Denbrock's 2-point plays were magnificent. What are we talking about? You want to talk about creativity? He gave you 2 of the most creative plays, and he probably had another one in his back pocket if they got the ball on that last drive with a chance to tie the game up.
Man.
So, look, that was just, man. I watched it again, and I was like, yeah, Ryan Day learned his lesson. And he learned his lesson from his previous defeats and previous failures. He learned his lesson.
That's what championship coaches do. He learned his lesson. And you tip your cap, Notre Dame fans. Hey, we didn't think you had it in you to run the ball 40 times. Sure didn't.
You proved us wrong.
Not a mailbag question, but I thought this was worth bringing up. Michael Hahn said, when you don't win up front, no defensive scheme is going to look good.
And Mike, you can preach it to the choir, Michael.
Man.
Yeah, man.
That's
1,000.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
We got a quick super chat in here from Tyler Evans. Thank you, Tyler. What fourth-year head coach is under more pressure this upcoming season? Lincoln Riley, Brett Venables, or Mario Cristobal?
Oh, it's not even close, Mario. It's not even close. Not even close. It starts week 1 when the Fighting Irish walk into his stadium. He can. I'll go further than he can. Notre Dame might go down there and just put it on them.
Well, look, I said this yesterday in the show. This upcoming season for Notre Dame is giving me revenge tour vibes.
Man.
You have that quote from Jaden Greathouse in the locker room. The only thing I can think about is the red and white confetti coming down to the ground. I'm just thinking about how I need to dominate next season. You had that video of Marcus Freeman before he entered the locker room, standing and watching the TV. Yeah. You want to, Marcus Freeman is big with the hold on to the pain. You want to talk about a motivated football team next season. If they keep the same mantra that they had this year and carry that motivation into next year, I will say, if I had to rank these, I'd probably go Mario, Brett Venables, Lincoln Riley. I think if I had to put them in an order. So that'd be where I'm at with that one. All righty. Got a mailbag question in here from Jason Smith. How big of a role would you say Lauren Landau played in helping implement this new culture at Notre Dame?
That's an interesting question, man, because you can look at it. I said all the time, I have no problem with people being worried about the laundry list of injuries that was suffered, specifically the season-ending injuries. With the change in philosophy with Lauren Landau coming in, but then the young players being ready to play is something on the positive side of that ledger as well. So, and this team, week after week, was the more physical team. We always saw opposing players on the ground, injured, timeout, injured player. So, you look at the injuries and say, man, we have to look into that. And I'm sure they will look into the analytics of what happened and how can we prevent this next year. But the one thing that stood out to me was the physicality of this team and how this team physically did not wilt and how they got stronger going into a new season of a 14 playoff. That has to be applauded. And they were the team, and they were the team that was surging in the national championship game. Ohio State was losing steam. That's something else to look at. Overall, the culture, I think that the change has been good. If they can use the information that they garnered this year to eliminate some of the big injuries, the season-ending injuries, I think it's going in a good direction.
And he was asked to do it in the first ever 16-game season in college football history.
Absolutely.
Like
a
that
lot
is
of moving
something.
parts.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of moving parts.
With real random breaks in there, man. I mean, Notre Dame had 2 bye weeks this year because of when Labor Day fell on. Typically, they only would have had 1. Then you had a month, little bit over, between when you finished, a little bit under a month, in between when you finished on November 30th against USC, and then when you go and you play Indiana in the first round. And then against Georgia, they were supposed to play on one day, had to stay and remain focused because of that awful tragedy that happened down in New Orleans. And then a week later, your first real taste of an actual game week from November 23rd when they played Army in Yankee Stadium to when they played USC in the Coliseum. You had that amount of time to get your team ready from Georgia to Penn State. And then you had a 10-day window to get your team ready from a very physical last-second victory over Penn State to playing a really, really good football team at Ohio State. The injuries are something that has to be addressed, and it's something that we're going to be continuing to monitor closely. But, I mean, at the end of the day, Lauren Landau played a huge role. I mean, even at the end of the game, after that big play that Jeremiah Smith had that essentially iced the football game, those next 3 downs, those pads were still popping down on defense. So either, and I think it's both. It's an and, it's not an or. I think Lauren Landau had these guys physically ready to play for 16 games this year. And you had a team that refused to quit and had a high motor. So I think it's both. But you tip your cap to Lauren Landau because no other strength and conditioning coach outside of now Ohio State's had to get his team ready to play 16 games this year. So I think Penn State played 16. So yes, because they lost in the
Big Ten championship.
Penn State and Texas both played. So you have 4 teams that played the most games in college football history.
Yeah.
And Notre Dame's was one of the last 2 standing.
Yeah.
So you go through and you look at, I mean, the surge that they had from the first half of Penn State to the second half of Penn State looked like a completely different football team. That goes to strength and conditioning, in my opinion. USMA 87. Do you happen to know if Golden has a buyout in his contract? My guess is that an NFL will pay it, but that can be used for the new defensive coordinator if this plays out as rumored. I don't know if he does. I mean, I would assume so. They just signed him to an extension.
That's pretty standard, right?
Yeah.
It would be smart. I would expect that Notre Dame was very wise the way they structured the contract.
Yep, absolutely. God Country Notre Dame Barbecue. Did Notre Dame do enough this postseason to change the narrative with the top tier of elite recruits of the country so we can land more of those dudes?
Top tier recruits always respect Notre Dame, man. If that's a narrative that's been out there, it's the wrong narrative. That's totally different from Notre Dame being able to close the top recruits and top tier elite recruits. Those are two totally different things. Notre Dame will always draw interest from top recruits. Now, you could talk about whether or not that interest has been piqued by Marcus Freeman, who he is, and players saying, I would love to play for him. Let me check them out. Instead of just having interest and receiving an offer, now let me take some visits, some really meaningful visits. Let me take an official visit, not just go to a spring practice, but let me come back for a weekend during the season. Those are the things that I think that are being improved and have improved. But the next step is that when you get the opportunity, if you get the opportunity to close on a big time defensive tackle or wide receiver, can you do that? Notre Dame, for example, Mike Brown said, I'll give him a pass for 25. That's me personally. Yeah, I felt like he was put in a tough position from the recruiting standpoint. He got official visits from 3 top tier wide receivers. Coach Brown, you didn't close. For whatever reason, you didn't close. That's the next step. And a lot of fans are going to compare you to your predecessor because he was able to close on a Jaden Greathouse. He was able to close on a Rico Flores. So this 26 class, you're going to have to close on some guys. And that's just an example. I don't think Notre Dame has a problem of garnering the attention of elite recruits. Getting the recruits to take Notre Dame seriously and ultimately commit, that will be the challenge. That will be the challenge.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Look, at the end of the day, Notre Dame is going to and will continue to look to attract kids that want to be at the University of Notre Dame. Playing in the national championship and competing the way that they did, especially the way that the game finished out, obviously is not going to hurt those chances to get more of those top blue chip recruits that everybody holds coveted so much. But at the end of the day, Notre Dame's not going to give an incoming freshman $2 million to come to South Bend. If they do, it's got to be a bona fide dude that they know is going to come in and have a Jeremiah Smith-esque impact to an offense. You know what I'm saying? Or come in and do what Caleb Downs did at Alabama in his true freshman year. But again, it's at the end of the day, Notre Dame has its core values when it recruits. And even though they're not getting the 5-star number 1 overall player in the nation kind of guys, it's not like they're just getting a bunch of 3-star guys that are ranked outside of the top 800 in recruits. It's developing talent. Like Shaun and I said, developing talent is significantly more of a factor than getting and landing some of those guys. So we have a couple quick ones in here, Shaun, that I just wanted to get to because we still have a good amount of really awesome submissions here. Carlos Garza says, Mailbag, no question here. Just wanted to say thank you to the IB team. This is one heck of a season. I agree, man. It was fun. I said it in the game yesterday. This was the most fun that I've had as a Notre Dame fan in my time as a fan. It's been really fun to cover. And Shaun, I'm sure for you, this is one of your more fun seasons that you've had since which season?
2012 was fun.
Yeah.
2015 was fun. 2018, 2000. Yeah, we've had fun seasons. I don't think I've had the same feeling after not winning, right? Fun in the sense that it was a great run with an opportunity to play, whether it was in the semifinals or in the national championship. But even after losing in those seasons, there was doubt going into the next season. Man, can we run this back though? With all of these questions. I don't have the same amount of questions as I normally have. So that, for me, this makes this season very special. I think more the start of something great than just being a one-off.
Yep, absolutely. You don't have the questions exiting this season that you did after 12, that you did after 15, that you did after 18, that you did after 20. And so leaves a lot of room for promise. We have one here from Price29. Did Denbrock have more than one season at LSU? Did he have Daniels for more than 1 year? Stop falling back on QB, was not in spring camp. Yeah, Mike Denbrock was at LSU, I believe, for the 22 and 23 season because he left Cincinnati after 21. if I'm remembering correctly.
No, he had when he got there, Jaden was the transfer quarterback.
Okay.
And he had Jaden Daniels for 2 seasons, and he developed them. And to the falling back on quarterback not being in spring camp, I don't, try to give clarity on that. Price 29. I want to know specifically what you're talking about. But I'll say this: for a transfer quarterback, it means more than for a guy that's been sitting around 2 or 3 years and actually has a relationship with the wide receivers. A transfer quarterback is literally learning his wide receivers, how they move, their routes, and getting timing down during the spring. And when you miss that, you miss valuable time, especially when you go into fall camp in a quarterback battle where you're not getting the vast majority of snaps. You're splitting the snaps. And in fall camp, you should be working on the offense evolving rather than trying to build with the receivers. That should have taken place in the spring. And so that is what set him back. And so to say that you can't fall back on that, no, you can't poo-poo it either. Like, you don't want to make a big deal of it, like it was just destructive to everything, but then you don't want to minimize it as if it was nothing, because it was something, specifically for Riley Leonard being the backup quarterback. Steve Angeli had a better rapport with the wide receivers than Riley Leonard to start the season.
Yeah.
Doesn't make him the better quarterback, but he has a better rapport of knowing his receivers better than Riley Leonard did.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. USMA 87, do you think revenue sharing will put Notre Dame at an advantage? Not all rev share will be the same.
Well, I think revenue sharing will equalize things across the board and make things more uniform. I think it will give everyone an opportunity to kind of just have a baseline and have rules in place and guidelines. And that would be better for everyone in college football. I don't think whatever happens, I think Jack Swarbrick was a visionary to understand we'll let this come back to us. We're not going to jump into this head, feet first, and we'll let it come back to us, and we'll be prepared for however it evolves, whether it's transfer portal, NIL, revenue sharing. It puts Notre Dame, because they are an independent, it puts them in a really good position to be able to deal with it. So I don't think it's going to be necessarily an advantage. I think their stance and the way they've handled things as they exploded, that's what put Notre Dame in an advantage, to be able to deal with it while everyone else has to scramble to figure out, man, how do we react to this? Notre Dame was proactive while everyone else is being reactive in the situation.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those that it's one of the advantages of Notre Dame being independent, right? And they have proven year over year they're one of the only schools that have the ability to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And have success, right? Other teams can choose to be independent. I don't know if they're making it to the national championship. I don't know if they go undefeated in 18. I don't know if they go undefeated in 20 or 2012, right? And so Notre Dame year over year just kind of proves that advantage potentially, like some of that revenue share, like making $20 million in the national to make the national championship game, like that doesn't just go to the football team. That goes to the university.
Yeah.
Right. And so like I have seen some of those questions like, oh, like Notre Dame has all this nil money now. It's like, well, hold on. Like the reason why now the school has bought into the football program being elite is because you want to talk about revenue sharing. They're getting a little piece of that pie of that $20 million that they got for that. They get a piece of the $14 million pie that they got for making the semifinals. And so that an advantage potentially, but I don't want to paint the picture that all of it just goes to the football team or just university athletics, right? Like it's spread out throughout the university. You compound that with their endowment fund, Notre Dame's in a good spot.
Yeah.
God Country Notre Dame barbecue. Can you give some way too early captain predictions? The talent will be there, but do we have good veteran leadership lined up? It's an interesting question because we talked about that yesterday, and upon further review, and the junior class next year, like the class that Jaden Greathouse is in, is probably going to be the class that carries you,
Yeah.
and so that one's going to be interesting. Shaun, what do you think, man?
I'll give a shot. I'll take a shot. I think Drake Bowen would be a captain. I think your quarterback, I think the expectation is that they would want the starting quarterback to be a captain. Typically, you have an offensive lineman as a captain, so that's like a Billy Schrauff, Ashton Craig could be candidates. Defensive lineman, maybe a Josh Burnham, maybe a JT. You know, I think definitely a defensive lineman would be a candidate. Jaden Greathouse, like you said, is possibly. I wouldn't be shocked if a Don Schuler isn't in consideration as a captain. Yeah, I think all of those guys would be, and that's just that's based upon the template that has been laid. Usually, you'll get a defensive lineman, an offensive lineman, a quarterback, you know, a dynamic player from the secondary or a leader from the secondary, and then, you know, another guy, you know. So, oh yeah, Coogan, yeah, you know, Rocco, Coogan definitely would be guys that would get votes because if I'm not mistaken, the team votes, and then the top 5 guys, I guess, that get the top votes. So yeah, there'll be candidates. They definitely would be candidates.
I go and it's tough to say because the team votes on it, right? And it's never an ideal split. Some years you have 4, some years you have 5,
Yeah.
some years you have 2 on offense, 2 on defense. This year there's 1 on offense and 4 on defense.
Right.
You know, so I guess if I'm going just kind of split down the middle here, right? I would get, if I go 2 on offense, 1 I think has to be Jaden Greathouse. I mean, he stepped up as a true sophomore in the receiver room.
Mm-hmm.
I was never at any of the practices, but I saw the videos that came out. I've talked to you and Brian about it. He was always the first in line at drills, the first out on the practice field. He was a vocal leader of that room. He makes plays in practice that not a lot of people get to see on game day just for different things, right? And so you go through and yeah, I think he has to be one of them. I think depending on like experience, leadership wise, and if he's healthy to come back, maybe an Ashton Craig. Like sometimes you see your starting center. I mean, he's going to be a redshirt junior in the fall. And so academically, he'll be a senior. He's been a part of this program for a while. I could see it being a him. You know, depending on who the starting quarterback is. I always like the idea of your starting quarterback being a captain of the team because that's just Marcus Freeman has said it before. There's really only one position on the team that emulates the job of the head coach, and that is the starting quarterback, you know? So you have that factor. And then on defense, I could see Drake Bowen. I could see a Don Schuler. I could see, across the defensive line, that one's a little bit more tough because you just don't know what the makeup of that group is going to look like.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, Gabe Rubio is coming back for his final year of eligibility. Maybe if he steps up into a leadership role similar to like what Riley Mills did this year when he was elected a captain. But yeah, if I were guessing, I would say some combination of them. I would say some combination.
Next year could be the year it flips and you get the inverse where you get more offensive players than defensive players.
Yeah. Yeah, very well could. You know, I mean, you could I don't know if this would happen, but I mean, you could even make the case for maybe like a dark horse for it, like a Devontae Smith coming in at like a nickel. I mean, Notre Dame has promoted captains. Yeah. Because you go through and think, I mean, he's played a lot of college ball. He spent a lot of time down in Tuscaloosa. He was on a Nick Saban-led team. So he brings a lot of stuff to the table too. Could be a him, maybe a Jared Dawson on the interior. It could be Malachi Fields for how much football he's played. So
Will Paulin was a captain at Wisconsin. So Will Paulin. So yeah.
So you never know. You never know. Salty Virginia Peanuts has a couple in here that we'll get to. He asks, is Brian Kelly, all things considered, happy or unhappy with the Irish loss?
I think he's more concerned with his program, man.
Yep.
I'm going to be honest. I think he's really disappointed with the way things have started. And I know they made an SEC championship team, but he's more concerned with having to make they have to win big next year, in my opinion.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yep. I agree. I don't. if I'm going to err on the side, I would say unhappy. Like Notre Dame losing has nothing to do with LSU's program.
No.
But I do think to some degree there were some players on that team that he recruited, and I don't think that. Look, say what you want about Brian Kelly as a coach, and I don't like how he left South Bend, but I also don't think he's like a villain in the sense that he wanted Jack Kaiser to cry at his press conference because he was so heartbroken about the loss. I don't think that would bring him joy. All righty, let's see here. He has another one in here. Shaun, you are looking really good, very fit. I trust all is well. Not really a question at all.
God is good, man. That's all I can say.
There we go.
Thank you.
There we go. Aiden Benami has one in here. How much better was our run scheme this year compared to last?
I love this. I love this. So this is going to be a great conversation with you. I already know it because I know you're going to get into the nitty gritty, but I'll just do it on the surface, right? Stats are better per game, right? I know it's only like 0.6 yards per rush, right? And people will say, well, we didn't have those 2 tackles. But what you did have, in my opinion, is a more diverse run game. They gave you the ability to make adjustments in the second half versus Penn State, and now all of a sudden start being effective. Now, throwing a guy out there like 56 had a little something to do with that as well. Hey. He made the changes look a whole lot better.
Yeah.
T-squared. He made Mike Denbrock look real smart.
Man.
Inserting him into the lineup because of injury. But with that being said, I just think this running game is going to continue to evolve as the passing game continues to evolve. And it's going to need to support the quarterback, the young quarterbacks, especially early in 2025. So with that being said, I think with Estime and that offensive line, it was downhill, man. It was just really downhill. Inside zone, G-gap, ISO. I mean, that's what it was for the majority of it. And I think this run game gave defenses a lot more to think about. But I'll be honest, I'm going to probably watch the first drive of the national championship game on repeat all off season.
Man,
like that's literally just lining up and just beating the crap out of somebody. Like, it doesn't matter. You know what's coming. We're just about to run straight down your throat. We're about to ram this ball down your throat. There's nothing you can do. It was beautiful to watch. Set the tone perfectly. Like, it really did. I'm like, yo, this is amazing. But I think now Notre Dame has the ability to do that and get into some other stuff, like outside zone, counter, like you said, G-gap, just pulling that backside right guard, kicking out and giving the ability to either run right or run left. And then you have the talent in the running back room to take a play that's meant to go inside and bounce it outside. Like, you didn't really, Aldridge could do it every now and then, but you have the ability to do that against elite speed and elite defenses. That's what's different about the run scheme from this year as opposed to last year. Now, I know Trevor's about to break it down now. This is about to be good, ladies and gents. Trevor's about to – this is his ballpark, baby. This is his ballpark.
Look, man, the first thing that I'll say is this. The run scheme for both of the teams in 23 and 24 fit who they had in the backfield. Because you're not going to ask Jeremiah Love to do the things that Audric could, and you're not going to ask Audric to do the things that Jeremiah Love could. I've seen a lot of questions come out of, well, Jeremiah Love was this explosive. Why didn't they use him more in that capacity last season? And there's your example. Is because you can't ask Jeremiah Love to be 6 foot, 235-pound Audric Estime in the same way you can't ask Audric Estime to take an inside duo play, bounce it to the outside, hurdle a corner who's standing up, and then run over a safety in the same light, right? But I think you also have to look at the personnel that you had along the offensive line. and you're not going to ask some of the personnel on that. I don't really know if you're going to ask Joe Alt to be pulling a whole lot on certain plays, right? You'll ask that of Charles Jagusah. You're going to ask that of Billy Schrouth, and so I think this run scheme fit who this team was more. And you saw that due to injury for Rocco against Penn State, they didn't pull him as much. They weren't using a whole lot of G-wraps with him. They weren't pulling the interior guards more. It is no mystery to me that when they put Charles Jagusah on the game and he was healthy, they ran back-to-back-to-back plays of pin and pull. So this run scheme, I will say, got better in that I think they're utilizing their personnel better because of who's in the backfield, who they have lined up at offensive line, right? And it even begs the question, too, of what would that have looked like with Ashton Craig at center in his athleticism, right? I love Pat Coogan. He's a culture guy. Everybody knows about his 4 quarters of football that he talked about all throughout the season and got highlighted in the postseason. But you start to think of what would that duo have looked like instead of pulling Rocco on a bad wheel and Pat Coogan. What would that have looked like with Schrouth and Craig? What would that have looked like if you're pulling Schrouth and Jagusah? You know what I'm saying? And so I think this run scheme fits who was in the backfield more than what it did last year, because the backfield last year was what it was. Notre Dame's run game at times last year, despite the stats that Audric put up, the run blocking last year was not fantastic.
No, but it was underachieving.
Yeah.
Underachieving. That's where you get caught up in the names of the 2 tackles. But the truth of the matter is, in the biggest games, I said this going into the national championship game. I'll take this quarterback, this offensive line, and these running backs over last year's version of that going into this matchup. I don't care about the names, because the names last year when they faced Duke, Louisville, and Clemson were underwhelming in the biggest moments. This rat-a-tat group that was, hit with injuries came up big late against Texas A&M. Came up big against Penn State. Late when they had to ice the game, they came up big against Georgia. I'm about moments. What do you do when your team needs you as an offensive line in big moments? And this year, they did a much better job in comparison to last year's offensive line with the big names.
Yep.
So,
yep. It's twofold, right? Because then the pass protection wasn't as good as it was especially on the edge as it was last year. But again, you had Joe Alt and you had Blake Fisher. So next year,
can you say that? Go watch that Duke tape.
Also, yeah, and Louisville, yeah,
and Louisville. So once again, in the big moments, the pass pro was leaky. The run.
That's facts. Yeah.
And so we understand why it was leaky with 2 freshmen. We get that. We couldn't figure it out with the tackles we had last year. That was the issue. And Zeke Correll was a pretty good center that eventually left or was beat out by, or decided to leave. I'm not going to say he was beat out by Ashton Craig, but they didn't have a competition.
Right.
He left after the season because of injury.
Right.
So, but no, that,
I mean, I think with the talent coming back in the offensive line room next year, you're going to kind of see a culmination of the best moments from 23 and 24 in next year's offensive line.
Yeah.
That's my early prediction.
And I think somebody said that offensive line, I agree. I put that in one of my tweets that I was interested in seeing if Notre Dame could replicate what they were able to do against the same personnel, or some of the same personnel, and putting up 142 yards, right? However, that personnel got better, and a lot of the running was to the interior, not to the outside. So your interior, guard to guard, is really where you won. And it's sad that Notre Dame, because Ohio State got out in front, couldn't continue what they showed you in the first drive that they could do. If Notre Dame was in hands reach in that game, they would have continued to hammer Ohio State up the middle. Ohio State wanted no part of that run game up the middle. But once it became a 21-7, 28-7 game, you can't do that anymore. That's why people they shut down the Notre Dame run game. No, they didn't. Notre Dame couldn't go to the run game. They couldn't hammer. If they had been given the opportunity, if the defense had showed up and given them the opportunity to continue to hammer, now we get a real look at what Ohio State's defensive line really would have done against Notre Dame.
Sure. Got one in here from DMND13. What are your early predictions on the 12 teams to make the playoffs next year? Half joking, but a year from now, you can come back and take credit for any you got right.
I can give 4.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can give all 12.
Who you got?
I'm always going to go with Georgia. Georgia's going to be one of the 4. I would assume that Sark with Arch, and they're going to have Ryan Wingo is going to be a beast next year. I'm saying it right now. Ryan Wingo is going to be an absolute monster next year. I'm very interested. 3 Big Ten teams made it this year, but I think 4 are going to be in the mix next year. I think they get 3 in, Trevor, but I think Michigan jumps back into the mix next year. Ohio State comes to Michigan. I believe they play Penn State. And scheduling is going to be, and now, dude, is Indiana a part of that mix annually now? So that Big Ten is about to be something else, right? And then, Illinois is right there as an outlier. They're improving under Brett Bielema. I think they're tier 2, but they're going to make it hard. They gave Penn State a difficult game at home this year. It was a 1-possession game in the fourth quarter. So I'll go with 3 teams from the Big Ten. I'm excited to see Dante Moore at Oregon too. Oh, but I digress. Oregon, Julian Sayin, a quarterback, but they had a talent. I'll go Oregon, Ohio State, and I'll say Penn State still has enough to edge out Michigan.
Yeah.
I'll say Penn State still has enough to edge out Michigan. It'll be close, but I think those will be the 3 from the Big Ten. Notre Dame, SMU, the ACC. Interesting because they play Notre Dame. That's going to be a big one. Georgia, Texas. Who will be the 3rd? I think Tennessee it's going to be interesting to see without Sampson if Nico can become a dude at quarterback. That's going to be interesting. LSU is in a must-win situation, in my opinion. I think Texas A&M will be viable because they made some great additions in the portal. I just really like their coach. Oklahoma, nah. Alabama, I need to see that quarterback situation. So I can't trust it. And I don't trust the defense to be Saban-like under an offensive-minded coach. So Georgia, Texas, and you know what? I'll say LSU. Just because it's one of those seasons. They have to. They just have to. So I'll say Georgia, Texas, LSU, and then Big 12. Arizona State, man, I really like what Dillingham is. I really do like what Coach Dillon. Hey, I like what he's doing out there, Arizona State. I would say Arizona State to run it back. So what is that? What did I give? Was that 8?
Yeah.
That was 3 from the Big Ten, 3 from the SEC. Notre Dame is 7. Arizona State 8. And then SMU, I said SMU.
Yep.
So 9. And your G5, who knows who that could be? So that's 10. And then your at-larges. Right? Does that 4th Big Ten team make it?
Right.
Like it did this year? I think that the 4th teams from the SEC and Big Ten are probably the two outliers. Okay. Those surprise teams.
Yeah, if I'm going to go on, Notre Dame, let's get them out of the way. I think they're going to make it back. Georgia, Texas. I think LSU with Garrett Nussmeier coming back too might have a little bit of something. Out of the Big Ten, or Oregon, they are losing a little bit on offense. Like Dylan Gabriel's gone. I don't know if Jordan James has eligibility to come back. He might. But I know Tez Johnson and Evan Stewart are gone. But Oregon, because I do like Dan Lanning as a coach. I don't know if he's a championship caliber head coach. I think those things will start to unfold. But to be fair, I didn't know if Marcus Freeman was a championship caliber head coach until midway through this season. Because I did not think he was a championship caliber head coach on September 7th. So that for Dan Lanning, I think remains to be seen. I kind of like Clemson out of the ACC. Because Cade Klubnik elected to come back. They got Tony Allen as their defensive coordinator. I think he's going to turn some things around. SMU, I like that.
I definitely like the DC hire, stealing them away from Penn State.
Yep. And
you know what? You just reminded me. Penn State might take a step back defensively.
Yeah. Penn State might take a step back. I like who they have coming back. The fact that Denai Dennis Sutton elected to come back is big for them because losing both Abdul Carter and Denai Dennis Sutton would have been huge.
Huge.
That both of their running backs elected to come back. Drew Aller's coming back.
But what's that, right?
That is what it is. But I like Andy Kotelnicki. I think he's a really good offensive coordinator.
Yes.
Out of the Big 12, I like Arizona State because they had a redshirt freshman quarterback under center this season. I like Kenny Dillingham. There's some things that they have to get cleaned up on defense. Out of the Big 10, I like Ohio State to make it back. I will put Penn State in there for the returning pieces that they have. But if their defense takes a step back, I wouldn't be surprised. Now, mind you, we are talking about a defense taking a step back from being one of the best in the country.
Yeah.
But I'm going to have to see some things offensively from Penn State that they're going to have to find some way to get a perimeter passing game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Similar issues with Michigan. Yep. That's why it's a toss-up between those two.
Yep. Michigan is losing some veteran presences on defense. Mason Graham is gone. Will Johnson's gone, but he didn't play like half of the season.
Yeah, so they got a lot of youngsters that got valuable time behind him. A kid that Notre Dame was on, they eventually moved to defensive back.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, all 12 is a lot because you're always going to have that one or two random teams that nobody thought IU was going to do what they were going to do this year.
No.
I certainly didn't. I did not, but you never know. Jacob Hayden, any surprises expected in the portal? I've been keeping my eye out on any more announcements. None have came out so far. And again, I'm sticking with what I said at the start of the show. I don't want to put something out there that is not true, right? I have no idea who might be. All I will say is this. With the incoming freshmen that they have and the amount of numbers they have at certain positions, people will continue to enter the portal because you have a set number of scholarships that you were allotted, even with the expanded amount of scholarships that you can give out. But, you look at Notre Dame's defensive line group, there's 22 people in that room alone. People are going to leave. I don't know who that is. Surprises, I don't similar to what Shaun brought up earlier, what's a surprise? You know what I mean? Do I think Jaden Greathouse is leaving Notre Dame? No, I don't. You know what I mean? But surprises, no, I don't. Because the three that got announced today in Pendleton, Colsey, and Thomas, more so with Colsey and Thomas, you could see the writing on the wall. But I understood Pendleton's decision. I don't think a name is going to come out where you're like, what? Yeah. This team is pretty locked in.
I think you have to look at roles, right? Who wants a greater role? Jay Mickey left because he wanted a greater role. Not that he didn't have a role. That was significant. But he wanted a greater role. So there might be some players. The offensive line guys are not guys. The guys that are in the top 8 or 9 of the offensive line, They're not going anywhere.
Right.
But they know they're needed.
Right.
Wide receivers, there's plenty of opportunity. So, no, running back. It depends on roles. Once again, if anyone left, it would be because of not having a defined role, right? Defensive back, it's the same thing. I think that for Notre Dame is always going to be players that leave because they want more of a role or to look at their particular point in their career. They want a greater role. And you can't fault them for that.
I agree. No, I agree. And sometimes, like we said before, you just kind of have to do as a coach what's in the best interest for your players, whether that's in South Bend or not.
Yeah.
So I agree. Jacob Hayden with another one. Over under 2.5 coaches leave.
Under.
Yeah, I'd go under on that one. Stymie. Given how we've seen Coach Marcus Freeman learn from his experiences and grow with nearly every opportunity, is there any reason to believe he will not take a huge lesson away from the national championship game?
Like I said, they're ever learning. They're ever learning. And that's every facet of this program, whether it's with Chad Bowden, the staff, they're looking at everything. And they're committed to making sure that every facet of the program is all about and geared towards making every player in the classroom and on the football field maximize their experience at Notre Dame. That's it. So you can't do that unless you're learning lessons. I saw someone with a post on the board, message board, that was talking about, Marcus Freeman, still needs to learn. And I'm like, that's everybody in life, hopefully. I hope everyone is taking the opportunity to better themselves on a consistent basis. And Marcus Freeman is no different. He's no different. The greatest head coaches were the greatest because it's a great documentary. I don't know if you've seen this documentary about the relationship between Bear Bryant and John McKay. Yeah. John McKay, when he took the job at USC, he kind of shifted things because they were the first program that really had a roster full of African-American players in college.
Okay.
They went to Alabama to take on Alabama and beat them. And that was before the SEC had become,
Right.
open.
Right.
And through their relationship, Bear Bryant started to open those opportunities and doors, right? So he had already won one way. But then he realized what was happening and he learned and he started winning another way. And then he ended up moving into the 70s. And won. Nick Saban won, running the ball, defense, low scoring. Then he saw how teams were beating his defenses, opening up offense, and he goes to get Julio Jones, and all of a sudden he wins another way. So that's coaching. That's just the development of a great coach. They always learn because they want to win, and they're not stagnant. And that's Marcus Freeman. I think going there and getting Malachi Fields in the portal shows us I want to throw the ball. I want a big guy that can, make big plays down the field and can be a force that defenses have to worry about. So, yeah, he's on his first move was having an open conversation with Drew Pine and Tyler Buckner to let them know, hey, I'm going to the transfer portal. Quarterback room is not good enough for what we want to do. That's the type of head coach you have. He's always going to question everything and look to move things forward.
The best coaches in college football are ones that take away lessons from both wins and losses.
Facts.
Look, Notre Dame doesn't go on a 13, 14 game winning streak without some lessons being learned along the way, right? Because when you win, it's easy for people to just say, oh, no lessons learned. You won the football game. It's like, no, you learn more about your team, what works for them. Obviously, it's more highlighted in losses when you come up short, and there's lessons taken away at all points, Stymie. But if you're a good coach and you always look to never be satisfied and continually develop yourself and your staff, there's lessons to be taken away from that. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure that if he had the chance to go back, I don't know if he runs that fake punt. You
Right.
know, I'm sure he
Right.
goes for it. I don't know if he runs a fake punt in that style. I saw that fake punt coming from 1,200 miles away sitting on my couch. You know what I mean? And so, like, there's probably definitely things that Freeman would want to go back and reevaluate. But if you're that high level of a competitor, there's things that coaches like the Nick Sabans of the world regretted doing in wins.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, like, that's just, he's, to Shaun's point, he's ever learning. He's never satisfied with where he's at. The second a coach is like, I can be taught no more things, that's when they start losing. It's when they start losing. So, yes, Steinman, to answer your question, I think he took away some pretty big lessons from the national championship game. And not just, it's not always just about a play decision here. You know, I brought up the fake punt. Sure, he might want to take that back. Maybe it's something in the week of preparation. Again, he learned something this entire postseason. No other team has played 16 games in college football. That was a learning experience for everybody. And now that he played that 16th game, he now knows what that's like. It was an unknown going into the season what it was going to be like not getting a first round bye. You expected it because Notre Dame will never receive one, but you don't know what that week of preparation looks like.
Yeah.
You don't know what that looks like for your team or your coaching staff, what that's going to look like on the recruiting trail, mental, physical preparation. And he learned all that this season. And he is one of 4 coaches in college football that can say that he now has that experience playing and coaching in 16 games. It's him, Steve Sarkisian, James Franklin, and Ryan Day. It's pretty decent company to be in for a head coach going into his 4th year being a head coach ever, not just at Notre Dame. So it's all good stuff. It's all stuff moving forward. Aiden Benami, how about all Marty Biaggi has been through these last few weeks? I know we know most of it, but wow, our whole team, everyone just battled.
Yeah, continue prayers.
Yeah. That guy went through the ringer and he showed up at work every day. And not only did he lead a good special teams unit, the special teams unit was impactful throughout the season, throughout the postseason especially, right? James Rendell got some punting things figured out. The coverage units were solid. The turnaround, and you hate it for the kid that his last field goal at Notre Dame was a miss, but the turnaround that Mitch Jeter had from the regular season to go into kicking the game-winning field goal in the Orange Bowl to send them to the national championship, that's massive. So, yeah. Hats off to Marty Biaggi for all that he endured this season and the team for rallying around him. Matt S., do you feel like Riley Leonard was playing it like Ian Book would by being a little gun shy until they got behind so much he just had to let it fly?
That's just who he is, man. He's been inconsistent in the passing game. You could tell he missed the easiest throws on that second drive, and he just was shaking his head almost like, I don't know why. He was just shaking his head but that's been all year. Like, I'm not shocked that he missed those early throws. He's missed those throws the majority of the year. It is what it is. Those 2 series were the game, or the honest opportunity for Notre Dame to win.
Yep.
Because they had to stay within arm's distance of Ohio State to be able to do what they do best. They just weren't able to do it. And it's directly tied to the inability after running the ball. I totally understand Mike Denbrock saying, now we have them on their heels in the run game. Let's hit them with the pass this second. And you had opportunities, and the quarterback couldn't connect. And now people are like, why didn't you keep running the ball? Because it's really smart, because I'm sure Jim Knowles and that defensive line are saying, oh, now we got to hunker down and stop the run this second drive. We're not about to allow them to do that again. Yeah, a smart offensive coordinator would say, now is the time to hit them with the pass. And you had open receivers that the quarterback was unable to get the ball to. So,
yep, absolutely. Michael S. put in a quick super chat here, kind of correcting an error that I had made from earlier in the show. He was referring to Chip Kelly's scheme, not Brian Kelly's scheme in the game. So in that light, Michael S., you are correct. Chip Kelly called a heck of a game. But that still doesn't change my opinion on the lack of execution of Notre Dame's offense, right? the play calling, and I will stand by this until the next season. Mike Denbrock's play calling was not the issue. It was the execution that was the issue, right? Because if Will Howard didn't see some of his receivers that were open, right? If the offensive line didn't block well on Quinshon Judkins' 70-yard run, I don't know how much we're walking away talking about how great of a game Chip Kelly called either, because you didn't see the result on the field, right? You kind of have to go through and dive into film to see, Mike Denbrock was actually calling up some good plays. And if they were executed better and well, I think we'd have a little bit of a different outlook, because everybody talking, it was a tale of two different halves. It's like, I agree, not from a play calling standpoint. It was from an execution standpoint, because the stuff that was there in the first half was there in the second half. They just didn't hit the shot. They didn't hit those shots in the first half. But Michael S., I appreciate the correction there. My bad. I thought you were talking about Brian Kelly in that one. So that one was on me. Price 29. If Ohio State could not stop Notre Dame's rushing game, quote, wanted nothing to do with the run up the middle, why did Notre Dame have the backup quarterback run it on fourth down? Why kick a field goal down 16 points in the fourth quarter? Look, I don't have a good answer for you on the fake punt. I don't think that was the right decision.
We question that.
I was about to say, I mean, that will be one that I won't understand, to your question. The field goal down 16 in the fourth, I think it was still early enough in the fourth quarter, because you break it down, you need two possessions regardless, right? Notre Dame's defense just got a turnover, and that was the drive where they drove down to get into field goal range. I think he weighed his options of, if you're going to need two possessions after that one, then I think you would rather have your second possession with a chance to win it than a chance to tie it to send it to overtime. I think that had to have been the analysis. I'm not saying that I agree with it. I'm just saying I think that had to have been the thought process, because you don't want your defense to force the only turnover of the game and you come away with 0 points. Now, the field goal wasn't executed, and I think that was a microcosm of the entire game. Notre Dame got a turnover, drove right down the field. They got stopped in the red zone, and they missed a 20-something yard field goal chip shot. I mean, they missed an extra point. And so the lack of execution there did not help, because, I mean, Mitch Jeter, the game before that, drilled a 40-something yarder for the game.
Yeah.
That's something that you got to execute on. But the field goal, I understand more than I understand the fake punt. Price 29, to your point, I could not fathom that decision for the fake punt. Or if you are going to run a fake punt, don't trot your backup quarterback out there to line up as a personal protector, because the second I saw that on TV, I was like, it's a fake. Fake punt. The guys I were watching the game with, they were like, really? On the 36-yard line? I was like, Steve Angeli's in there. So unless he is also Notre Dame's backup quarterback and the best personal protector on the team, this is a fake punt. And lo and behold, that's a decision that they made to go with. And so that's a spot you don't put Angeli in. That's a play call that you don't make. That one was confusing for me all around. Price 29.
And even with that being said, it goes back to what you said. Jordan Faison should have caught the ball. Mm-hmm. It still came. Oh, that was a bad call. You shouldn't have done that. Jordan Faison had the ball in his hands with the first down. All right. Mm-hmm. So if you execute the play, we're probably saying something totally different. At the end of the day, players have to make plays. And sometimes they make plays to absolve, coaches of bad decisions. Sometimes they do. Jordan Faison didn't help Coach Freeman out in that instance by making the play when he had an opportunity. The field goal, they got to stop right after that. Marcus Freeman was probably thinking, hey, we kick this field goal, get another stop, score, and we're right, man. Mm-hmm. We're right in it. So he didn't show. I love that, because he didn't show any panic.
Nope. He
was giving confidence to his defense, like, go get a stop.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I agree. Like, Faison should have caught the pass. Like, I'm not, like, this isn't on Angeli. Like, the play call as a whole, I don't like.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sometimes, that's what I'm saying. Sometimes great players make bad calls look like they were good calls, Trevor. Mm-hmm. Like, players make plays, and it's like, I really shouldn't have made that call, but heck, I got a dude that went out there and made a play, so he made me look good.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We got a super chat in here from Patrick S. Duffy. Thank you for the super chat, Patrick. Will Howard played the game of his life. Great passing and perfect decisions to pull it down and go.
I would say Brian K. and Chip Kelly called the games of their life.
Yeah. Yep. I
And
agree.
enabled Will Howard. Patrick, you're right. Will Howard, they put Will Howard in a great position to play a great game.
Yep. And he executed on what they asked him to do. I mean,
he sure did.
Look, man, no quarterback that goes 13 of 13 to start the game did not play a great game in the national championship. I'll say that. I will say that. It's another super chat in here from Tyler Evans. Thank you, Tyler. Mr. Davis, what do you think of the Ben Johnson hire?
He nailed the press conference. Stay tuned. He won the press conference. Trevor, he was really impressive. But that press conference doesn't mean a darn thing.
You didn't like Eberflus's first press conference as a Bear?
I was never impressed with Matt Eberflus. Never. The man was on the verge of being fired as the defensive coordinator when the Bears hired him. That just lets you know everything you need to know. But no, he did it. He great, and he was honest.
Yeah,
honest, transparent. This is what we're going to do, and he knew exactly what to say to the Chicago fan base. He said, "Yo, I love whipping up on Matt LaFleur twice a year." I said that was good. You get it. You get it.
He's also bringing over that offensive line coach with him, I think.
Yeah. Now they actually have to go get some offensive line talent.
Yes, I was about to say, man.
You can bring the coach over, but if you don't go get some talent.
Yeah, you got to beef up the talent in that room, but they got a good foundation to start, man. They're going to be excited to watch this year, that's for sure.
Dennis Allen as DC, good hire.
I like that. Hey, stuff's coming together up there in Chicago, man.
Yeah, Vince will be feeling much better after today, I think.
Good. Yeah, one of my best friends is a diehard Bears fan, and I mean, you want to talk about the definition of fighting through resiliency, and
man, you don't want any parts of this, Trevor. Not this pain.
Salty Virginia Peanuts. Rank these linebackers in order of development and effectiveness after the season's experience. Jaden Ausberry, Drake Bowen, Kingston, Viliamu Asa. In order of development and effectiveness?
Oh, how the development of this season?
I think so. Ranking these linebackers in order of development after this season's experience. So who benefited the most from it? I mean, if I could go in order, like I don't even have a 1, 2, and 3. I have a 1 and then a 2A and a 2B, if I'm being honest with you. My number one's Drake Bowen. And I say that because at the start of the year against Texas A&M, there were calls coming into the field where he just at moments he looked lost. He did. You fast forward to the tail end of the season, and he is physically dragging players to get lined up in their proper spots. Against USC, one of the best plays of the game that nobody talked about was a 3rd and 3. USC checked into – Drake was waiting for USC to get set because they did that check with me, look to the sideline. Waited for USC to get set, barked out the play at the line of scrimmage, and then came in and made the tackle because they tried an outside zone play. And he saw and read and diagnosed what that was. So Drake Bowen, for me, I mean, the journey that he went on from where he started the season to where he ended it, as far as defensive recognition, to me was huge. And then Ausberry and Viliamu Asa, like I'll split in half because Viliamu Asa and Ausberry played, I believe, until the injury, especially like a similar amount of snaps. Kingston with that freshman or that experience as a true freshman is invaluable. But Jaden Ausberry at times this season showed that he's the best open field tackler on that team, and his speed flashed at times. But at the end of the day, you're going to need all three. I mean, that very well could be the starting linebacking core next year, which is why I said for Ausberry and Viliamu Asa, it's like a 2A, 2B thing, because you could make the case that the experience was invaluable to Kingston because he is a true freshman. Jaden Ausberry kind of had to wait for his opportunity in his redshirt freshman season, but then he came on and took advantage of most of the opportunities that he was given this year. So that's where I'm at with those guys. How about you, Shaun?
I'll look at it from a different way, right? Because I think what you said about Drake is absolutely spot on. But I think this team and his coaching staff found out a lot about Kingston he came in playing one position, but there are so many different ways that I think that they realize they can use this kid. And I think you saw that develop over the season, right? He's going to come off the edge as a pass rusher in certain situations. He's going to be a blitzer, and he could be the middle linebacker. So I'll go Kingston 1 just and find out information, and then I'll go Drake, and then I'll go Osbury.
I like that. Yeah, absolutely. Jacob Hayden, with Colsey and JT gone, will Notre Dame look to the portal or think they're happy with their current numbers counting the 2025 class in the wide receiver room?
Well, they already collected 2, and they lost 2. So, I mean, the numbers are good right now. The numbers are good. If someone jumps into the portal or enters the portal after the spring that they have interest in, I mean, I'm sure they'll look at all positions, in the spring portal when that window opens back up. So as of right now, going into the offseason, I think they're content. They're happy with that, what they have.
Yeah, I think so too. I think if one other leaves, they might look to address some other needs. Who knows what that looks like in the spring transfer portal? But right now, I think they're content. I could be wrong and off on that. Like I said, this is the new territory for me concerning this job. So could be off on that. I know Brian's going to talk a lot about that on the boards. We're going to have multiple shows about that throughout the season. So, but as of right now, if I had to guess, I think they're happy with their current numbers because they went through and added Malachi Fields and Will Pauling.
Yeah.
Coleman Smith. Shaun, is there any Illinois offensive linemen in 2026 we should keep an eye on? Are they considering Notre Dame?
We're gathering information right now. No one jumps to mind right now. There could be a couple of downstate Illinois kids, but no one in the Chicagoland area. But I'm gathering information as far as whether or not Notre Dame is interested. There's no one in particular that will be coming up this weekend. But once the spring visits start, once spring practice begins and unofficial start, I'm sure there'll be a few Illinois offensive linemen. Offensive line position. This is one of the years in the 26 class where I think the top 10 players in the state of Illinois are either quarterbacks, wide receivers, or defensive linemen. Usually offensive linemen this is good ground to grow offensive linemen. But as of late, a lot of defensive linemen. There are a lot of defensive linemen going to Big Ten schools and being looked at, by SEC schools and big time programs. So it's fertile ground for defensive linemen in 26 more so than offensive linemen. But we'll see.
Yeah, I like that. Aiden Benami, this is a fun question. The top 1 to 2 performers on each side of the ball for all 4 playoff teams.
Well, Greathouse has to be 1.
Yeah.
Just for what he did to you. Greathouse has to be 1. They kept having injuries, man. It's hard because Riley Mills probably, the way he played against Indiana, Riley Mills was probably about to have he's about to make a lot of money.
Yeah.
Going to the NFL if he didn't get injured after Indiana. The back-to-back games for Jagusah. Pretty darn good. I would put Riley Leonard in that run.
I would. I think you have to.
Yeah.
Like for what he was able to do against Georgia, and everybody's going to talk about the passing yards, but run game was ineffective, and he went and rushed for 80 yards. That's the difference.
Leonard Moore, without question. Leonard Moore is definitely one of the two. We can have a conversation about everybody else. But Leonard Moore is just... You have to watch the film. You have to watch the film to see why. He's just... What he did the 4 games in the playoffs, what he did against the receivers of Ohio State, it's like... I go back to that first drive. He was this close. That 3rd and 3, when they ran that comeback to Jeremiah Smith, He was this close.
Mm-hmm.
He was this close to stopping that. That's how good the kid is.
Yeah.
But he was just a second left, and he would have wrapped him up for about a 2-yard reception, and they would have had the punt. But he's just, and that's against the best of the best. He's that dude. So I would say him, and then I would just go ahead and say Riley. Leonard Moore and Riley.
Yeah, I mean, on each side of the ball for me, I mean, you got Greathouse, you got Leonard. For all 4 of the playoff games, I see that's so tough because, like, in each game, you had different people step up.
Facts.
Like, that's what's so tough because if you ask me strictly IU, J Love. I mean, you're taking it 98 yards to the crib against the number 1 rush defense in the country.
Yeah.
Defensively, Riley Mills for what he was doing. But then he gets hurt, right? So if it's all 4 playoff games, Riley Leonard, Jaden Greathouse, but then even Jaden Greathouse, I mean, he wasn't a major part of the offense against Indiana and against Georgia.
No.
Right? But I think the performance of what he did in the Orange Bowl and the national championship, I don't know how you leave him out. You know what I mean? So, yeah, offense, I'll go a combination of J Love, Riley Leonard, and Jaden Greathouse on defense. Leonard Moore's up there. Xavier Watts is up there.
Don had a really good playoff.
Yeah. So there's a lot of good options on any side, if I'm being honest. I am Tenzin. How many practices are we getting me up to witness for the spring? He needs to know how amazing this team will be.
How many times can he make it?
I mean, my dad lives in South Bend. I mean, I can be there, man. Look, I would love to, right? Like that's just we'll have to work out the logistics of it. I don't know what is involved to go to a practice. Like I think is it kind of just the same as being up in the press box? You just have to get media credentialed and then you just go? Or?
I mean, yeah. I think spring is a lot more open.
Gotcha.
You know, more limitations are put on fall camp.
Sure.
They limit the amount of people that can be represented from an outlet in fall camp. That's pretty much the difference. You know, spring practice, most spring practices is, Notre Dame. Let me put my prayer on the altar. I pray that you all recognize what you have in the product and that it needs to be spoken about and seen more extensively. We appreciate the days we get 5 periods to watch the team, but we really appreciate at minimum 3 full practices for us to view, to talk about this wonderful product that is Notre Dame football. So I just want to make that request, my humble request.
I'm here for that. I'll go. I'm at the point where I'll go see anything I can. You get me on that campus to go watch stretches, man. I'll go check it out.
Because I appreciate what we are given.
Yeah.
But I think it will help us do an even better job of proclaiming the greatness of Notre Dame football if we had just a little bit more time to watch that greatness unfold right before our eyes. That's all.
Love it.
That's all. But Trevor, I can't wait. I'm going to send pictures. I'm going to post pictures, guys, to Trevor's first practice. Because the smile on his face is probably going to be never ending. His cheeks are probably going to be sore.
Man, it was the first time I got the opportunity to be up in the press box this season. One, very hard not to cheer. That is really
that is tough, right?
Man, a lot of under the table fist bumps. And there were a couple of times where I had to check myself, like on a bag call. Man, like I can contain myself if like something cool happens, like I can just kind of give a little, under the table or something. But on a bad call, there were a couple of times where like I stood up like really quickly and then I had to act like I was like stretching or something. Man. I was like, I had to play it off like a cramp or something because I was just like, I'm gonna get kicked out of this on my first time here. I gotta chill.
Well played by you.
Tom Frawley, what are the chances CJ Carr wins the starting quarterback job at the conclusion of the spring camp?
You look, I think, and I know they do it for a reason, but I would love for Notre Dame to know who their guy was at the end of the spring. I would, because I think it
Yeah.
sets a tone going into fall camp. And I think they've known that Sam Hartman was the guy. I think they knew that Riley Leonard was going to be the guy, but it wasn't publicly proclaimed, right? So the truth of the matter is, it doesn't matter whether or not we know, as long as it's known in that building and amongst the players who the guy is, and that's all that matters.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's CJ Carr, Kenny Minchie, Steve Angeli. Just once again, I feel Notre Dame can win with all three quarterbacks that will be going into the spring for a competition. We can talk about who we prefer all we want to, but we are in a different era of Notre Dame football where we legitimately have three quarterbacks that can win games at Notre Dame.
Mm. Mm. It's a good spot to be in. It sounds good to say. Man. Sounds real good to say. Salty Virginia Peanuts. Is Notre Dame now among the elite that will perennially contest for a national championship?
In theory, I think they have to do it again.
That's my thing. I have to see it again.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Do they have all the makings to do it? Yes. Do I feel more confident coming out of the season? Yes. I can't say that their first national championship appearance since 2012, they are now just going to be competing for a national championship every single year. Now, that's the standard at Notre Dame, right? The standard at Notre Dame is to always put yourself in contention to compete for a national championship. But mind you, that was also the standard in 2016. That was also the standard in 2013. That was also the standard in 2014. And so they're like, I have to be able to see it, right? The chips are there. The pieces are there. Now I just have to see it, Salty. I think this is going to be a good one to kind of bring back up after the 2025 season and talk about even if they don't make the national championship next year, because he did say contest for a national championship. If next season they go on another playoff run and they get to the semifinals and win or lose a close game, yeah, I think then you can confidently say this is a stage that Notre Dame will be back to consistently over the next 3 to 5. But I got to see it again. So that's where I'm at with that one. Mark Couch. Has offensive coordinator Denbrock always coached from the sideline, or was that more of Riley Leonard's comfort being so new to the system and missing spring ball? Shaun, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but it was my understanding that Denbrock likes to be on the field.
He's done both. I think he spoke about it prior to the season, and he said he made the decision because he felt like for this situation, that's where he needed to be.
Yeah.
But I think at LSU, he spent time in the booth.
Okay.
At LSU. So he can do both. I know there were times where he was up in the booth in his previous stint at Notre Dame. But I think because of the new quarterback situation, he wanted to be on the field with Riley Leonard. I would assume that he would stay on the field with his first time starting next year. That would be my assumption. Probably. And in order to do that, you have to have a lot of trust in the guys in the booth. Because the main reason you go up to the booth is to have a bird's eye view of everything that's happening. So, I think the operation continues to be on the field for him. That would be my guess.
Sure. Especially, this year too, you're implementing a new offense. You want to be hands-on with the feedback that you're giving in the moment, being able to be hands-on as much as you can. So, yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Salty Virginia Peanuts. Should Mr. Golden leave? Is Notre Dame better off bringing in an experienced DC or promoting Mike Mickens? That I'm not sure of. Right? The news is still not official that Al Golden is leaving. I'm under the impression that he will. It's just the signs are kind of pointing that way. Look, I think Marcus Freeman's kind of hinted at it all year. Mike Mickens is coming up very quickly on the point where he's ready to be a defensive coordinator. And if that can happen in South Bend, he has to be involved in the hiring process.
Yeah.
Right? Like he has to be, you know what I mean? Like they're already throwing out different titles at him to like get him to stay. Defensive pass game coordinator, like, you know what I mean? Stuff like that. And so that to me, you start showing the signs of somebody that you're giving him more and more ammunition to stay because of the impact that he has on your team. And so for me, I would go the route of Mike Mickens better be at least in the finalists of candidates if that position opens up, right? Because I do believe that Freeman he will evaluate all options that are on the table. Like, I don't think, like, let's just say hypothetically, Al Golden at 5:15 today says that he is going to be leaving Notre Dame. I don't then think at 6:15, Mike Mickens will be announced as the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame.
Right. Yeah.
I think there will be formal interviews. There will be different things going on here, but I have to believe that Mike Mickens will be a leading candidate for that position. Because Freeman throughout the season has hinted. I think he even said it on Here Comes the Irish, the documentary that came out on Peacock, that this is a guy that's working up the ranks and is getting ready to run his own defense. And if he has that opportunity in South Bend, I would love nothing more than that.
I think just to add to that, you said something earlier that I think is something to look at if Al Golden does indeed leave. And that is, this is his third season. His style of play and what we saw with some veteran offensive coordinators is that they started to pick up on some of the tendencies of Al Golden after 3 years of tape. Would it be beneficial to Notre Dame to have somebody else in there going into the playoffs next year?
Sure.
Big games where you don't know. You're trying to figure out what are his tendencies? Could that be an advantage? That's not me saying that I want Al Golden to leave at all. I don't.
Right.
But it's just something that you can point out to say that would be something that would be an added layer to offensive coordinators to now not have 3 years of tape that leads to, knowing the tendencies of the defense.
Yeah, no, I agree. And look, let me be clear. If I had a preference, it would be Mike Mickens. You know what I mean? But I think they will evaluate all the options that are on the table, if I had to guess. Matt S.
That's whoever it is.
Yeah.
Whoever the new DC is, they'll be different. They'll be different.
Matt S. Is it safe to say Notre Dame has done the work to build the next generation of Subway alums, or do they need to win it all?
I mean, Notre Dame has been building that, winning seasons, losing seasons, drought since '88. The growth of the Subway alumni has never really wavered. I mean, the brand is the brand. Little kids still love chicken McNuggets from McDonald's. That happened when I was a kid. I mean,
hey man, I still like chicken McNuggets.
Yeah. Now somebody told me the other day that they have an Impossible Burger at McDonald's now. I'm like, whoa, that's crazy. But I mean, nothing on the field. I'm sure it probably makes it better, but it's always going to be blossoming, as far as the Subway alums.
Yeah, absolutely. Ryan Schulte, fellas, what a memorable year. The best part about it was I got to take in so much of it with my wife and 3 kids. That's awesome, man. What are your top 3 moments of the season? Top 3? Some of mine are situational, right? Like overall as an experience, like a moment for me was going to the Notre Dame Indiana game with my dad after the week that him and I both had after my grandpa passed away. That is something that I'm going to remember for the rest of my life. And like the relationship that him and I have is very much like we like to go out and do things, experiences and stuff. And that was the first game that him and I had been at since 22 Clemson.
Yeah.
And so, we were kind of talking our stuff before the game. It's like, hey, like Notre Dame just doesn't lose when we go to games. Like literally, like I mean, I went to 2012 Pitt with him. I went to what other game? 22 Clemson with him. We went to the Indiana home game for the playoffs with him. So it's not a moment for the team, but that is my the game itself was a top 3 moment.
Yeah.
Jaden Harrison's 98-yard kickoff against Georgia is something that I'm probably always going to remember, to be honest with you. And then, I mean, probably, God, it's so hard to look at it in a vacuum. One of Jeremiah Love's hurdles, I guess. It's just this was a big season of first for me. I started working at Irish Breakdown. I got to go cover the team in the press box at Yankee Stadium. I was there for their senior day. I went to, as a fan, the first home playoff game. I mean, look, Ryan, I love the question. It's going to be hard for me to narrow it down to 3. That's where I'm at with it, Shaun. What about you?
All 3 of mine would come from the postseason. And I think I have one that would be battling with those 3. The first touchdown ever in the 12-team playoff, man, 98 yards. That you can't beat that, right? Christian Gray's interception. You can't. That was huge. That's a huge moment. And then, like you said, Trevor, and I'll counter with one moment regular season. You took one moment, but that time from the strip sack that led to the touchdown before half to the opening return for Harrison, that right there. Clip that. That highlight. You can run that. That's one. The only other thing that can compare is the back-to-back pick sixes.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's the only regular season clip that would jump in and possibly compete with those 3 things. But yeah.
Yeah, those are mine. No, those are good. Those are really good. Ronnie Reeves, do you expect any of the quarterbacks to enter the transfer portal before spring?
Nah.
No, I don't, because it's an open competition right now. It really is. Whether people have a preference or not, CJ, Kenny, and Steve are all going to be battling it out from basically now until the end of spring practice. And it could carry over into the fall, right? You never know. I mean, I would hope that the team has more of an idea when they start implementing the specific offenses that they are going to be running in the fall. But I would hope that they have a pretty good idea going into spring. Salty Virginia Peanuts. How many more players will Notre Dame bring in via the transfer window, and at what positions? I'm not sure. Did Freeman come out and say that they were done with the portal, or are they just kind of evaluating what's going on moving forward with the spring portal?
I don't know if anything officially has been said, but I think they wait for the spring portal to open up. Because that's when a lot of kids would jump in after either losing battles or, realizing that better opportunities might be elsewhere. So
if I had to guess, they probably wouldn't be done, depending on what happens at if a kid gets injured during spring and you have an immediate need that you need to fill. So yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I guess I just answered my own question, but yeah, I mean, how many more players? That's up for debate. I'm not sure. At what positions? I think it depends on who starts to pan out, who's developing over the spring, what that's looking like. Because, you have the positions that I'm going to be watching: interior defensive line, right? I'm going to be watching some of the specific positions at offensive line. I think you have enough players along the offensive line in general that you don't have to bring in anybody specifically. But Notre Dame players have until, I believe, the end of this week to announce that they're leaving. So maybe there is that surprise guy that the team has to go and then evaluate the portal on, but that one I'm not too sure on, Salty. Some defensive coordinators, like Jim Knowles, are known to have defensive schemes that take more than one season to fully teach. If Mickens becomes DC, would that happen?
Well, I'll ask you a question, Trevor. Is this Al Golden's defense or Marcus Freeman's defense?
I'd probably Freeman's.
So that kind of helps answer the question.
Yeah, and you also have to keep in mind too that yes, it's more from a secondary perspective, but like Mike Mickens is bringing in guys that fit what the defensive scheme is already.
Right.
So I don't think if Mike Mickens takes over as defensive coordinator, they go away from playing press man.
No.
You know what I'm saying? Like you never know with him as DC. Maybe personnel changes could be different, right? But I think overall, I think there's still going to be a team that's base 4-3 that will run a 4-2-5. They play a lot of press. They're going to rely on their safeties to play center field. They're going to still maintain. My biggest thing, no matter who is the defensive coordinator, they have to maintain their identity of being aggressive. That is what made Notre Dame's defense so dominant. And that's a benefit that you get of having a guy like Mike Mickens because he proceeded to watch that for the last 3 years, right? So I don't think, especially in the first year, hiring and somebody internally, I don't think they're going to jerk the wheel too much with what they're doing because obviously what they're doing currently is working, right? Like, I mean, Notre Dame has had a top 5 defense in the country the last 2 years. So I don't know how much schematically it would change, especially if Mickens becomes a defensive coordinator. That's kind of where I'm at. That's where I'm at with this one. Salty with another one in here. Is Charles Jagusah a virtual lock to start at left tackle next season, or will there be a real competition that he might lose? Look, man, we said it at the start of the show. Look, barring a handful of players, like Drake Bowen, I think is a lock to start at middle linebacker. Adon Schuler is a lock to start at safety. Jaden Greathouse is a lock to start at wide receiver. Jeremiah Love is a lock to start at running back. There's going to be open competition spread throughout the team, in my opinion. But look, man, I find it hard to believe after watching what he did. I find it really hard to believe that Charles Jagusah will not be your left tackle to start next year. I find that really hard to believe. Shaun, do you see it differently?
Once again, my question when people were talking about Charles Jagusah as a guard, my question is, who's better? If you want him to play guard, who's better than him at left tackle? If you have a better option, then put him at guard. If you don't, he's a left tackle. So as of today, who is the better option at left tackle on the roster? Without the freshman coming in, who's the better option? As I said earlier, saying he's a elite guard that could be a top 15 pick if he plays guard is true. That does not eliminate the fact that he can be a first-round tackle. They both can be true. He can be really good at both. Put him wherever you want to be, whatever he makes you better, put him there. If you have a better option at left tackle, move him to guard. It's really that simple. He started at left tackle because there was no one else on the roster that was better. It's really as simple as that. Ladies and gentlemen, after playing guard, he was moved to left tackle after not practicing at left tackle in preparation when he was allowed to practice again because there was no better option after Anthony Knapp got injured. If that doesn't tell you how talented the kid is, I don't know what else to tell you. So we're sitting up here debating about guard tackle about a kid that can be great at both. He can be great at both. He's Quentin Nelson. That 56 means something, I guess, at Notre Dame.
I guess
that 56 means something. He's Quentin Nelson like.
Yeah. Well, look, man, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I was like, from the perspective of like, dude, like what? You can't watch what 56 did and assume that he just can't be on the field. He will be on the field somewhere. My vying bet is it's going to be at left tackle for your exact point. Who is going to come in to be better? It could be Will Black, who, you know what I mean? Like maybe Anthony Knapp takes this monumental step in pass protection and playing in space in the offseason. But I don't think that you can go through and look at what he did in the 2 sample sizes that you have at him at left tackle and say that you can confidently say that somebody who has yet to play snap in college football is going to be better than that. Yeah. So that's where I'm at with him. But Charles Jagusah will be starting somewhere because
so
you never
Trevor, you're saying that his limited tape is better than anybody else's tape at left tackle this season. Is that what you're saying?
In pass protection, yeah. Okay. I'd say that. Yeah. Yeah. You and I are there. I get it, man.
Yo, I please give me more of these arguments. Please let Owen Streamyard bring more of these arguments. Let Will Black bring more of these arguments.
Yeah.
Let Matty Augustine bring more of these arguments. I love these type of arguments. Oh, he can be great at guard, tackle, right, left. I like these issues. I love these issues.
Oh, yeah. Look, man, if your issue is Charles Jagusah is so good, we just don't know where to play him, that's a good issue to have, right? Like I would rather that be the issue than he has to play this position, right? Like you and I both said, like Brian has said with us, like we've all talked about, Notre Dame is going to have a spoil of riches next season along the offensive line. Now it's just up to the coaching staff to decipher which lineup is going to be the best 5 lineup, because if they get it right, Notre Dame's offensive line is going to return back to the who can stop this offensive line, right? That's end of the day. I think that's where it's going to be at.
Yep.
Got a question in here from Silly Goose. Who do we schedule our 12th game with? Status quo with Stanford. Back half of the schedule lacks any real challenge on paper. Worries me we sleepwalk through the back half and are unprepared for the playoffs.
Well, Silly Goose, I mean, I understand that. But a lot of people going into the playoffs said that Notre Dame wouldn't be prepared because they played a soft schedule this year. Either you're good or you're not, man. Either you're good or you're not.
End of the day, like I think what this kind of went to show was, one, this college football season showed that anybody can beat anybody.
Very much so.
I don't think Alabama looked at the back half of their schedule, especially after the season that Oklahoma had, and they were like, oh man, we still have a daunting task.
Yeah.
Like I don't think that Miami, with all the success that they had this year, expected Georgia Tech to do what they did to them and beat them and knock them out of playoff contention. I don't think Ohio State looked at Michigan after the season that they were having and thought that they were going to. Plus, we don't know how good some of these teams are going to be, right? In the back half of Notre Dame's schedule.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anybody was expecting Florida State to be what they were, but in the same light, I don't think a lot of people were expecting Navy and Army to be what they were either. So some of it, you just have to play it out and let it see, right? Like do I think that I don't think that Texas A&M and Miami are going to have like some monumental fall off that what Florida State had, but you don't know how good those teams are going to be until the season starts to play out. So on paper, you look at it and say, man, Notre Dame has back-to-back games against Miami and Texas A&M. How is that going to play out? I mean, you never know. Miami could end up going 7-5.
Because the purpose of that trip, of course, they'll keep USC, right? USC is a home game next year, right? So now they still need that late season trip out to the West Coast, which goes into building the alumni and allowing your alumni on the West Coast and your fans on the West Coast an opportunity to see you. So if you take away Stanford, who's in Northern California, maybe now you play a Vegas game every year, right? Maybe it's BYU in Vegas. Maybe it's Utah in Vegas.
Or it could be somewhere down south. You know what I'm saying? What if it's somewhere down in like Texas? Who knows? Like it's who knows what that looks like. But yeah. I mean, let me pull up Notre Dame's 25 schedule real quick, because I know
it's a Big 12. They could do it Arizona State.
Yeah.
Arizona. It's a lot of warm weather options, that would allow them. I think that Vegas connection, especially with the way that Vegas area is booming.
Yeah.
If they played a Vegas game every year, West Coast recruits would have opportunity to come check them out. That would be dope.
There's still a lot of games that have yet to be scheduled, and I would have to imagine that a good amount of them are going to be on the back half. The only ones with dates are Miami, A&M, Purdue, at Arkansas, Boise State, USC, and Navy. And those all happen outside of the Navy game at Notre Dame Stadium. All of those happen from August to middle of October. They still have yet to have dates for Pitt, Boston College, NC State, and Syracuse. And so they have to add one more. So on top of scheduling where all of those are going to come in. So yeah, I mean, if they're going to add some games, I think that'll be interesting to see who it would be, but somewhere out west, somewhere down south, something to help along the recruiting trail, things like that. That's kind of where I see it. It sounds like we're being on the same page here, Shaun. All righty. Got one in here from Archer. Which position group are you most confident in for 2025? Which group are you least confident in / has the most question marks? I mean, the most confidence I have is in Notre Dame's running back room, right? I mean, J. Love coming back, J.D. Price coming back, Aeneas Williams coming back, Kedron Young is going to start getting more snaps. You don't know what Nolan James is going to do. Jabron Payne is coming back from injury. So I think regardless of what happens in 2025, Notre Dame is going to have another elite running back room. On the offense, I'll do this for you, Archer. I'll give you 2 on offense and 2 on defense. One that I'll split this into both. The one that I have the most concerns about I guess not concerns, like the most question marks is Notre Dame's receiving core. Not because I doubt that they have the talent, but they've had the talent in other years. Shaun, you and I talked about this with Brian after the national championship game, after the post-game show. And I said that I had to see it. You know, I mean, Notre Dame's receiving core and going into 2023 was, hey, they got, Jaden Thomas has another year under his belt. Jaden Greathouse and Rico Flores are 2 really good incoming threats. Tobias Merriweather could have a big season, all these things, and it never came to fruition. And then this offseason, you got Bo Collins from Clemson, and Chris Mitchell was a transfer from FIU. He was an 1,000-yard guy, and Jaden Harrison was an All-American returner. Jaden Greathouse stepped up, and he's a leader in that room. And Jordan Faison has another year of experience under his belt, and then some of it just never really came to fruition. So I like the potential of this receiving room. You got Malachi Fields coming in, Will Pauling, all those other players that I listed are, they're another year they have another year more experience. But for me, it's just a question mark because I just have to see it. And that's where I'm at. Because I don't like the offensive line I'm confident in. Like regardless of who they roll out there, whatever combination of 5, it's going to be experienced.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I would throw quarterback in that conversation, but the fact that there's no talk around a transfer portal quarterback and they're confident that they have the guy in that room gives me confidence. And so for me, it's a receiving group, but I wouldn't have any pushback if anybody thought quarterback either, because it is a question mark, right? But then on the defensive side, the most confidence that I have is I mean, you can lump the secondary together if you want specific positions. I have a lot of confidence in their corners. I mean, that's what I'm the most confident in 2025. Most question marks is the defensive line. Yeah. How are you going to do replacing Howard Cross and Riley Mills and RJ Oben? Who's going to step up on the interior? Who's going to be healthy and step up at the edge? So that's where I'm at with that one, Archer. What about you, Shaun?
Most confident group for me, probably O-line. I want to go running back, but I would probably say O-line. No, you know what? I'm going to go running back. I'm supremely confident in that running back group. I love the kid they're bringing in. I think he's underrated. Like
Nolan James, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm supremely confident in that running back room. Question, I'm just going to say quarterback because it is a question. I could say safety, right? Only because you're losing Xavier Watts. So, it's a question. Like, what are we going to get? At what level? I don't think the nickelback, it hasn't been a question. They've been able to go out and find, and they've gotten better. Each nickel has gotten better. I think Jordan Clark has been the best of the best. And now I think Devontae Smith has a chance to be even better than Jordan Clark. If that happens, and this defense can really take another step.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I think, running back, most confidence. And then I'm just going to say quarterback because, we first-time starter. It's a question.
Yep. Totally.
It's a question.
Totally. I'm with that. I have one from Nicholas Grosh. Do you think that Evans improved his draft status by his solid play in the playoffs?
I've been seeing like posts on the message board. People really are worried about tight end. And is there a Michael Mayer in there? But heck, you didn't have a Michael Mayer this year.
Right.
With Mitchell Evans. And Mitchell Evans, no one saw Mitchell Evans coming last year. Tight end was a question mark after Michael Mayer and Mitchell Evans. I think the position is coached and developed very well at Notre Dame. And I think Eli Raridan, he'll be even more healthier coming off his injuries. Hopefully Cooper Flanagan comes back. You have Jack Larson coming on. You go out and get the Washington kid from Arkansas. I think James Flanagan has a chance. That kid, go watch his film and his senior season. Senior season. Senior season. He's a playmaker on both sides of the ball, man. He's a playmaker as a defensive player. And the kid can jump, great ball skills, athletic. He can come in, maybe he's a Michael Mayer that comes in and makes an impact as a freshman. So I trust the position of tight end at Notre Dame. I think he improved his draft status. Not so much what he did, because I think his draft status was solid based upon what he did his junior year before injury. For me, what's going to go a long way is how he responded from a difficult situation and something probably that he regrets, how he handled some early situations. I think those are things that are going to pique the interest of GMs and scouts when they get a chance to talk to the staff. Because they not only want to see the tape, but they want to know the type of person you are. How do you respond when things aren't going your way? And the response we saw from Mitchell Evans when he possibly felt like things weren't going his way goes a long way to whether or not, teams look at him in a certain light. So,
sure.
Yeah.
So I will say this, and let me get this organized here. It was just announced officially Al Golden is gone. He is heading to Cincinnati. ESPN reported it. Matt Fortuna reported it. So Al Golden has officially left. He is becoming the next defensive coordinator for the Cincinnati Bengals. So we've had some super chats about it. I already said that if there's going to be any big breaking news in this episode, that we'd spend a little bit of time and give initial gut reactions on it. So, Shaun, initial thoughts on what this means for Golden, what it means for Notre Dame, what the outlook looks like there.
Honestly, I think this plays into depending upon it. So, oh man, Al Golden has been fantastic for Notre Dame. Did not want him to leave. You can still get a very viable defensive coordinator, whether it's in-house or you go out and get someone, and you might just get an upgrade recruiting-wise from the DC position. That's just one layer of it. It's one layer of it. If you go in-house, Mickens was a name that was mentioned in the chat, something we discussed. Now you have to fill that defensive backfield. And that, from a recruiting standpoint, has been a bloodline of sorts to how you play defense, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how this thing goes and how the process plays out. But I think you have, it may not have been before, but this is I think this is a job that a lot of elite defensive coordinators would want. I don't know if I could have said that. And I think Notre Dame has shown recently that they will step up financially for elite assistants. And if they're going to back up their words that they're going to support Marcus Freeman in this program, then here's another opportunity to prove it right here, regardless of whether or not it's in-house or they find someone else, But yeah, there are going to be a lot of people will be inquiring about this position. This is a hot job.
I was just about to say that, man.
This is a hot job.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah. And here's the thing. The work that Al Golden did made this a premier job. Any opening at a school like Notre Dame is always a hot commodity. But now Al Golden has worked this defense up to back-to-back years of being a top 5, top 10 defense, right? And more notable players are looking to come here. I mean, you can even look at some of the differences in the transfer portal acquisitions, right? No, I mean, Al Golden took this to a spot where now in the transfer portal, they're attracting corners from Alabama to transfer back into Notre Dame, right? And so I think you tip your cap to Al Golden. It was one of those where at some point you knew that coaches, when they have this level of success, it's unrealistic. Like the Brent Venables of the world, that was like Clemson's defensive coordinator for like 7 years. It's just not like that. Just doesn't typically happen. And Al Golden had a heck of a time at Notre Dame, right? Unfortunately for him, a lot of what's going to be talked about is what happened in the national championship.
And that's not fair.
It's not.
Fair.
It's not.
Fair.
Because Notre Dame doesn't get to the national championship with Al Golden.
Facts.
Notre Dame doesn't get to the national championship stage without the performance of that defense, who lost Riley Mills, who lost Jason Onye, who lost Boubacar Traore, Jordan Botello, Jaden Mickey, right? And not only did they lose them in season, from the 2023 season, they lost Javonte Jean-Baptiste. They lost Maris Leofau. They lost J.D. Bertrand. They lost Cam Hart. They lost 2 safeties in Ramon Henderson and DJ Brown, right? And so you go through and you look at what Al Golden was able to do with the losses that he had. It just makes his job all the more commendable. You lose Ben Morrison, the guy that everybody talked about was one of, if not the best cover corner in college football, and a true freshman steps up and Christian Gray steps up. And it's not even like there was a lapse statistically, right? Yeah. We can have the conversation of what the national championship looked like if BMO was playing, but Ben Morrison had been playing for 2 months prior to the national championship game. It's not like they lost him after Penn State. I think that's something realistically that you have to look at. But the job that Al Golden did, I mean, he put Notre Dame's defense on the map, man. I mean, he made Notre Dame a team where the defense is something that you pay attention to, that you fear. And he was kind of like Notre Dame, if you go back through and look, has had a good line of defensive coordinators come in for them. You know what I mean? You started with Mike Elko, then you go to Clark Lee, then you go to Marcus Freeman, then you go to Al Golden. That line of coaches puts you in a spot where whoever takes over, whether it be an internal candidate or you start looking elsewhere, which I do at the start recommend that all options are on the table, right? Now, if I had a preference, I think Mike Mickens at defensive coordinator would be a logical option, not the only one, but a logical option for what he's been able to do with the secondary. And now you kind of have that conversation of, look, we already lost Al Golden. We have Mike Mickens here, who is all the more ready to be a defensive coordinator himself. And here's a prime opportunity. Yeah. Right. And I know that there's some question around, well, he's never been a defensive coordinator. I mean, sure. Al Golden hadn't been a coordinator since 2005. And he came in and he did a pretty decent job starting in 2022. You know what I mean? Marcus Freeman had not been a head coach ever in his tenure, and he stepped in and they're at where they're at right now. And so I think Mike Mickens would be another logical choice, but that's where I'm at. Well, there was a mailbag question that came in about it too. But I mean, initially, look, guys, Brian on the message board, you see it scrolling down there at boards.irishbreakdown.com. He's in the process of writing a story about this right now. And it's going to be another topic of conversation. If I were a betting man, which I am, Brian and I are probably going to have a show surrounding what does this mean for the defense, who's next, what are the viable options for this, probably sometime within the next 24 to 48 hours. Don't want to speak for what the schedule is. The best way that you do that is you hit the notification bell so you know whenever we go live. And obviously, we're going to talk about it on the premium message boards as well at boards.irishbreakdown.com. But it's a hot topic of conversation now. And now I think that job has now risen to the top of attractive coaching jobs in college football, Shaun. I mean, what about you?
To all candidates. Don't forget, Al Golden came from the NFL. He came from the NFL to Notre Dame. So this is a job, like I said, if they put it on LinkedIn, it's going to be resumes coming in from everywhere.
Listen, if they put it on
NFL.
LinkedIn, they put it on LinkedIn, I'll apply just to apply. Hey, man. I just to say I submitted an application, I'll apply. I got my resume on there. I can click the LinkedIn easy apply. Look, man.
Yeah.
But no, it's to everywhere.
Yeah.
It's not just college football specific. You're right. I forgot Al Golden came from the Cincinnati Bengals, and it makes sense,
he came
right?
From
like
Cincinnati Bengals as a linebacker coach. That's what he was. He came from there, and I think he had a learning curve. Like you said, he hadn't coached in college in a long time. He had to learn some things in college. And so now he had to learn the difference from NFL preparation versus college preparation. NFL, you have time with your guys. They're in the building all day. College, you don't have time with your guys, right? So being able to streamline. And he always said what helped him the most is that his players are extremely intelligent. The players at Notre Dame are different. So that gives you the ability to give them a lot. But the biggest thing for a Mike Mickens, like you said, as a first-time defensive coordinator, will be feel. Knowing when to call things. Figuring out how people want to attack him. People are going to be trying to figure out his tendencies. He has to learn their tendencies. You have to grow. You have to allow him to grow, right? And so he's going to have his Ohio State double safety blitz moment. Every coordinator has that moment where it's like, why did you make that call, right? And then there are going to be some moments where I think I've talked to several players on the 2002 team. I know that was probably before your time, Trev, I'm sorry. But they talk about the DC they had, because I don't want to say his name. They were like, dude, he would just make calls and we would just wave him off like, we're not doing that. Because they just knew, like, no, we're just going to have to make plays. And sometimes your players are just good enough to overcome some of your deficiencies as you learn as a coordinator, right? And so was Marcus Freeman any less of a coach in his first season after the Stanford and Marshall loss? Because he's the same coach that just hammered a top 5 Clemson. This is the exact same coach, right? Did his players make plays in that game that they didn't make against Marshall and Stanford? Did he automatically become a better coach just weeks better? Those are the types of things that, even with Mike Mickens being a first-time defensive coordinator, he can lean on the fact that he has a talented roster, a really talented roster that's going to be able to make whatever design or scheme that he can come with come alive and look really good. So I'm interested, man, because I know there will be outside candidates,
And you'd be remiss if you didn't highlight what Al Golden was able to do for Notre Dame in the time that he was here, right? Like in his final season, given all the injuries that I had listed off, Notre Dame finished 4th in the country in scoring defense. They finished 4th in the country in passing defense in yards per game. They finished number 1 in the country in QB rating. They finished 5th in the country in interceptions. You go through and you look at what they did in total defense. They finished number 11 in total defense. They played some good offenses this year, man. I mean, the schedule wasn't all what it was cracked up to be. Like, don't get me wrong, but I mean, USC with Lincoln Riley, you never count out that offense. They played a really good offense in Indiana. They played a really good offense in Ohio State. They played a really good offense in Louisville. Jeff Brom at Louisville, he can draw it up over there, man. You go through and Notre Dame finished with, a top 20 red zone defense in the country. Multiple draft picks were seen under Al Golden's tenure, right? The emergence of Ben Morrison was under Al Golden's tenure. So there's a lot of things that he did for Notre Dame's program to get it and elevate it to where it's at right now, which makes the coordinator hire, the future coordinator hire, all the more interesting, right? One thing that did creep into my mind as well is I also think that if you do promote a guy like Mike Mickens, I think that eliminates the potential for other people to follow Mike Mickens via the transfer portal, right? I think most of these kids are bought into Marcus Freeman and the things that he's doing at this school. They are bought into receiving their education, the 4 for 40 that Marcus Freeman preaches. I do believe that, but I do think it's going to be something that if Mickens does get promoted, it's just another factor of like, it is another benefit of, hey, not like in an offseason, not only did we lose our defensive coordinator, you lost your passing game coordinator on defense, and you lost your defensive backs coach in Mike Mickens. I think that all of that will just start to eliminate the people wanting to enter the transfer portal even more, because we did get a lot of transfer portal questions throughout this show. So, I mean, I could be off the mark there, but that's kind of how I look at it, Shaun, because you see there is a trend of, when coaches leave, a lot of the positions that they coached and had an impact on either follow him or
you can just look at Georgia. When Fran Brown left, who was a huge part to the back end of that Georgia defense, and what the different looks that Kirby likes to give, you have to have that back end to be able to do that. Same thing with Al Golden. Everything he liked to do, he could do with confidence because he knew those guys on the back end were locked down at defensive back and safety. So when you lose a guy like Fran Brown, who has been successful as a head coach, great coach, he showed it. And so Mike Mickens is the same way. Same way. So, yeah.
Going to be interesting to see.
Al Golden leaving is not impacting recruiting. I'll just leave it at that. It's not impacting recruiting like that.
No, listen, guys, Chad Bowden and his staff, the position coaches that they have, and Marcus Freeman have proven to be fantastic recruiters.
Mm-hmm.
Like the guy that they come in to close is not Al Golden on the recruiting trail. They will use Al Golden as, hey, like they'll meet with the kid, obviously. Like it's not like Al Golden has no hand in recruiting. But it's, the closers are still Chad Bowden and Marcus Freeman. You know what I mean? So it's, again, I'm with you. I don't think it'll have an impact.
I didn't want to see him go. But hey, no. I didn't want to see Audric Estime go either. But I love Jeremiah Love and Jabari Price.
Right. So right. Like it's one of those
what Mike Mickens has, or whomever gets the job.
Right. Like, it's the same conversation. Like, you don't want to see Ben Morrison go if that's what he elects to do.
No.
But it's just it's the same. It's the same conversation. But I will tell you one thing: if they do elect to put it up on LinkedIn, I guess we'll have to check it out. Maybe we'll just have all of the Irish Breakdown staff apply and see what happens. See what Brian would probably be the leading candidate for that job.
He probably would. Yes.
But because my qualifications to get this Irish Breakdown job were relatively minimal. So if I sit down with Pete Bravaco and Marcus Freeman, what do you know about defense? It's like, well, listen, man. I know that you guys have had a pretty good defense.
I stayed at the Holiday Inn Express down the street. Hire me.
Oh, man. Oh, that's good. Well, listen, guys, we're coming up on the 4-hour mark here. You guys have had really, really awesome submissions today. There is one last super chat that we wanted to get to. It's from Jim Murray, and I think it's a fitting way to end this episode. He said, wanted to say thank you for all the hard work during this magical season. Jim, we appreciate that, man. We appreciate your super chat. This has been a really fun season to cover for Notre Dame. It really has. Yeah. And it's, like I said, it's been my favorite one that I've been a part of in this offseason, or this whole season, right? And then you add in what I've gotten to do from the other side of the table, not just watching this team from a fan standpoint. It's made it all the more better. And so there's going to be a lot to talk about, guys. A lot to talk about. Obviously, Notre Dame is getting a new defensive coordinator at some point. We don't know when that's going to be. We're going to start giving analysis and breakdown of who we think all the potential candidates could be because, yes, I have gone on record and said I think Mike Mickens would be a really good logical hire. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other really good candidates out there. We just have to dive in and see who that's going to be. right? So with that being said, Shaun, you got anything else for us, man?
No, as always, go Irish, man. You know what it is.
As always. And as always, be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and share this podcast with your friends and your family. Whatever platform that you guys watch this on, make sure that you leave us a 5-star review, whether that's Spotify podcasts, Apple podcasts. Be sure to download all the episodes. It's going to be awesome. And of course, the best way to support what we do here at Irish Breakdown is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com, right? There's going to be a lot of content out. Like we just said, Notre Dame is now in the search for a new defensive coordinator. There's going to be a lot of talk about that on the boards. But they talk about all things Notre Dame. They talk about all things college football over on the boards. A lot of great conversation happening over there. But the only way that you're going to see that is at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So for the first ever Trev and Shaun Davis show, I had a lot of fun. This was a good show, man.
Hopefully it won't be the last.
No, absolutely. Because I was about to say, man, after the post games, I was like, man, I'm just not going to do another show with Shaun Davis until the next post game. And then Brian was like, hey, you and Shaun Davis going live today. And I was like, all right, let's get it. Let's get into it. So, well, good deal. Well, for Shaun Davis, I'm Trevor, and we will see you guys back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast.